Caleb Turner's hands trembled on the steering wheel as snow pounded his windshield like tiny fists demanding entry. Inside that warm steakhouse, a woman waited, a stranger his daughter had begged him to meet. 4 Christmases had passed since he'd buried his wife, 4 years of pretending he wasn't drowning. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight, he was supposed to try again. But as he watched couples disappear through those glowing doors, all he felt was the crushing weight of being late, unwanted, and utterly foolish for believing he deserved a second chance at anything resembling happiness. Stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far this tale travels. Now, let me tell you what happened when Caleb finally opened that truck door. The parking lot of Henderson's Steakhouse looked like a snow globe someone had shaken too hard. Fat flakes tumbled from a bruised December sky, coating everything in white silence. Through the frosted driver's side window, Caleb could see the restaurant's windows glowing amber and gold, filled with the shapes of people who seemed to belong in warm places. People who knew how to laugh without checking themselves. People who hadn't forgotten how. He wasn't one of them anymore. Caleb pressed his forehead against the steering wheel, his breath fogging the air inside the truck's cabin. The heat was on full blast, but he couldn't stop shaking. Not from cold, from the paralyzing certainty that this entire evening was a catastrophic mistake. "What am I doing?" he whispered to the empty space beside him. The passenger seat had been empty for 4 years now. Sometimes he still forgot and turned to say something to Sarah, only to find nothing but the ghost of her laughter. His phone buzzed. Another text from Ellie. "Did you go inside yet, Daddy? Did you meet her? Is she nice?" The string of question marks made his chest ache. His 8-year-old daughter had more hope in her pinky finger than he'd managed to scrape together in years. She'd found Rachel's profile on some community group. He still wasn't clear on the details, and had orchestrated this entire blind date with the determination of a general planning a military campaign. "She's lonely like you, Daddy," Ellie had said 3 nights ago, her serious brown eyes studying his face. "Her mom died too, and she takes care of her sister all by herself, just like you take care of me. You should meet her. You should try to smile again." How did you say no to that? How did you tell your baby girl that you'd used up all your tries, that the man who knew how to smile had been buried alongside his wife in a cemetery plot that cost more than his truck? You didn't. You agreed. You put on a clean shirt and cologne that smelled like trying too hard. You drove through a snowstorm, even though Christmas music on every radio station made you want to drive off the road. And then you sat in a parking lot like a coward, 23 minutes late, because walking through that door meant admitting you were ready to move on. Except he wasn't ready. He'd never be ready. Caleb checked his reflection in the rearview mirror. Tired eyes stared back at him, 34 years old and looking 50. Gray had started threading through his dark hair, appearing overnight after Sarah's funeral. The lines around his eyes had deepened from squinting through too many sleepless nights. He looked exactly like what he was, a man going through the motions because someone he loved had asked him to. Another text from Ellie. "Daddy, inside, now, or I'm telling Aunt Marie you chickened out." The threat of his sister knowing he'd bailed was somehow worse than actually going inside. Marie would never let him hear the end of it. She'd been trying to set him up with every single woman in their small Montana town for the past 2 years. This was his chance to prove he could handle his own life, thank you very much. "All right," Caleb muttered, killing the engine. "All right, 5 minutes. You can do 5 minutes." The cold hit him like a slap when he stepped out of the truck. Snow immediately coated his shoulders, melting into the fabric of his jacket. He'd forgotten gloves. He'd forgotten a lot of things lately: how to sleep through the night, how to eat meals that didn't come from a microwave, how to be a person instead of just a father running on fumes and coffee. The walk to the restaurant's entrance felt like miles. His boots crunched through fresh powder, leaving tracks that filled in almost as quickly as he made them. Through the windows, he could see the Friday night crowd, couples leaning across tables, families celebrating something, a group of men laughing at the bar. Normal people doing normal things. He used to be normal. He used to know how to do this. The door was heavier than expected, or maybe his arms had forgotten how to work. Warm air rushed out to meet him, carrying the smell of grilled meat and wood smoke and something sweet. Cinnamon, maybe, or vanilla. The hostess looked up with a practiced smile that faltered when she saw his face. Sir, table for one? No, Caleb cleared his throat. I'm meeting someone. I'm late, really late. She probably already left, but I should... Name? The hostess's smile had shifted into something more sympathetic. She'd seen this before, Caleb realized. Men showing up too late, hope already dead in their eyes. Turner? Caleb Turner. Or maybe it's under Rachel? Rachel Monroe? The hostess scanned her list, her lips pursing. I don't see a Monroe here. Let me check the bar area. Sometimes people wait there when their party is running late. Running late? What a polite way to say stood up. That's okay, Caleb said quickly. I'll just look around. If she left, I completely understand. This was probably... Wait here, the hostess interrupted gently. Let me ask around. What does she look like? And there it was, the question that exposed him completely. Caleb felt heat crawl up his neck. I don't know. We've never met. It's a blind date. My daughter set it up, and I know that sounds... actually, that sounds kind of sweet. The hostess's smile turned genuine. Okay, give me a minute. There are a few single women here tonight. I'll see if anyone's waiting for a Caleb. She disappeared into the dining room, leaving Caleb standing in the entrance like a teenager picking up his prom date. A family pushed past him, kids hyped up on the promise of steak and dessert. The father caught Caleb's eye and nodded, one dad to another, and Caleb wondered what that man saw when he looked at him. Did he look as desperate as he felt? Excuse me? Caleb turned. The hostess had returned with a woman in tow. Not the hostess, someone else. Someone in a blue sweater with blonde hair pulled back and an uncertain smile playing at her lips. Are you Caleb? The woman asked. Caleb Turner. His brain stuttered. This must be Rachel. She was here. She'd waited for him despite the fact that he was almost half an hour late. She hadn't left. Yes, he managed. I'm so sorry. The roads were terrible, and I should have left earlier. I'm really sorry. The woman's smile widened with relief. Oh, thank goodness. I thought maybe you'd changed your mind. I'm just glad you made it safely. The snow is getting worse by the minute. She seemed nice, kind. Her eyes were warm, and she didn't look angry that he'd kept her waiting. Maybe this wouldn't be a complete disaster after all. I'm sorry, Caleb said again, because apparently that was the only phrase his mouth knew how to form. Have you been waiting long? Not too long, she said, though something flickered across her face that suggested otherwise. And hey, you're here now. That's what matters, right? Right, Caleb tried for a smile. It felt rusty, unused. Do you have a table? Just sat down, actually. Come on, it's back this way. She led him through the restaurant, weaving between tables with an easy confidence Caleb envied. He followed, hyper-aware of every step, every person who might be watching this awkward reunion. The woman, Rachel, he reminded himself, her name is Rachel, glanced back once to make sure he was still behind her, and something about that small gesture loosened a knot in his chest. Maybe this was okay. Maybe he could do this. The table was tucked in a corner, mercifully away from the main crowd. Two menus sat waiting. The woman settled into one chair and gestured to the other, and Caleb sank into it gratefully. His hands didn't know where to go. On the table felt too forward, and his lap felt too closed off. He compromised by gripping the edge of the table. So, the woman said, and her smile had turned a little nervous too, which somehow made everything better. This is happening. This is happening, Caleb echoed. I have to admit, I almost didn't come. Really? Why? The question was so simple, so genuinely curious, that Caleb found himself answering honestly. Because I'm terrified. Because I haven't done this in over a decade. Because my daughter had to practically force me out the door. And even then, I sat in my truck for 20 minutes trying to convince myself to turn around. The woman's expression softened. Your daughter sounds pretty wise. She's 8 and she's already smarter than me. 8? The woman leaned forward slightly. That's a great age. Is she your only one? Yeah, just Ellie. Caleb stopped, unsure how much to share, then decided to hell with it. If this was going to crash and burn, might as well be honest. She's the reason I'm here, the only reason. She told me I needed to try smiling again. Something shifted in the woman's eyes. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. That's a lot of pressure for a little girl to carry. She doesn't see it that way. She just wants her dad to be happy. Caleb picked up his menu, more to have something to do with his hands than from actual hunger. What about you? Any kids? No, no kids, but I help raise my younger sister. She's 15, so I kind of get the single parent thing, even if I'm technically not a parent. That still counts, Caleb said firmly. Raising a kid solo is raising a kid solo, regardless of the biology. The woman smiled, and for a moment they just looked at each other across the table. It wasn't the electric, butterflies in your stomach feeling that movies promised. It was quieter than that. More like two people recognizing each other as fellow survivors of some unspoken war. A waitress appeared, breaking the spell. Hey there, can I start you folks off with drinks? Just water for me, the woman said. Same, Caleb added. And maybe a few more minutes with the menu? Take your time, the waitress said cheerfully, disappearing as quickly as she'd arrived. Caleb scanned the menu without really seeing it. His mind was still catching up to the fact that he was actually here, actually doing this. Across from him, the woman did the same, though he caught her sneaking glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking. Can I ask you something? Caleb said finally, setting down the menu. Sure. How did your friends convince you to do this? Because I'm assuming you also needed convincing. The woman laughed, a surprise sound that lit up her whole face. Is it that obvious? Yeah, my sister and her friends have been on my case for months. They seem to think I work too much and need to put myself out there, whatever that means. Ellie used almost the exact same phrase, Caleb said, feeling the ghost of a real smile tugging at his lips. She said I needed to put myself back out there before I turned into a hermit. Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. Caleb paused, then took a breath. Look, I should probably just say this now. Get it out in the open. I'm not good at this. At dating, at small talk, at pretending to be someone I'm not. My wife died 4 years ago, and I haven't really figured out how to be a person again since then. So if I'm awkward or weird or... Stop, the woman said gently. She reached across the table, not quite touching his hand, but close enough that he could feel the warmth of her palm. You don't have to apologize for grieving, and you definitely don't have to pretend to be anything other than who you are. The knot in Caleb's chest loosened another inch. Thank you. Thank you. Besides, she continued, withdrawing her hand with a small smile, I'm probably just as awkward as you are. I spent 20 minutes in my car practicing conversation starters and still managed to forget all of them the second you walked in. You practiced conversation starters? Don't judge me. I'm not judging. I'm relieved I'm not the only one who has no idea what I'm doing. They shared another smile, and this time it lasted longer. The waitress returned with their waters, and they ordered food. Caleb got a steak he probably wouldn't taste. The woman got salmon she'd probably push around her plate. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that they were both here, both trying, both willing to be awkward and honest and human with each other. The conversation found its rhythm slowly, like a song neither of them knew they were playing. The woman told him about her sister, about the challenges of suddenly becoming a guardian when you're barely an adult yourself. Caleb talked about Ellie, about fourth-grade science projects and school plays and the terror of raising a daughter in a world that seemed designed to crush gentle things. She wants to be a veterinarian, Caleb said, because she thinks she can save every animal she meets. Last month she brought home a bird with a broken wing and cried for 3 days when it didn't make it. Did you cry with her? The question caught him off guard. Yeah, he admitted. Yeah, I did. Good, the woman said firmly. She needs to know it's okay to feel things, even when they hurt. That's what her mom used to say. The words were out before Caleb could stop them, and he tensed, waiting for the awkwardness that always followed mentions of Sarah. But the woman just nodded, her expression understanding rather than uncomfortable. She sounds like she was a good mom. The best. Caleb took a sip of water, buying himself a moment to push down the emotion threatening to rise. Sorry, I know talking about your late wife probably isn't great first date material. Who made up that rule? The woman challenged. Your wife was a huge part of your life. She helped make you who you are. Of course you're going to talk about her. Most people don't see it that way. Most people are idiots. Caleb laughed, actually laughed, the sound rusty but real. You might have a point there. Their food arrived, and they ate with the easy silence of people who'd stopped performing for each other. The steak was good, perfectly cooked, but Caleb barely tasted it. He was too focused on the fact that he was actually enjoying himself, that the dread he'd carried into the restaurant had transformed into something that almost resembled hope. "So what do you do?" the woman asked, spearing a piece of salmon. "For work. I'm a carpenter, mostly custom furniture, some renovation work. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills and lets me set my own hours so I can be there for Ellie." "That sounds perfect, actually. Do you enjoy it?" Caleb considered the question. "I do. There's something satisfying about building things, about taking raw materials and turning them into something useful. Sarah used to say I was happiest when I had sawdust in my hair." There was a pause, brief but noticeable. The woman's smile flickered just for a second, and Caleb felt his stomach drop. Had he said something wrong? Was he talking about Sarah too much? "What about you?" he asked quickly, trying to recover. "What do you do?" "I'm a nurse," she said, and her smile was back in place. "ER mostly, which is chaos 90% of the time, but I love it. There's never a dull moment." "That must be incredibly stressful." "It can be. But it's also rewarding, being able to help people on what's often the worst day of their life." She paused, something shadowing her expression. "I was working the night my mom died. Different hospital, different state, but still. I sometimes wonder if I'm trying to save everyone else because I couldn't save her." The honesty of it hit Caleb square in the chest. "I get that," he said quietly. "I build things because I can't fix the one thing that actually broke." They looked at each other across the table, two people carrying invisible weights that no one else could see. The restaurant noise faded into background static, the clinking of silverware, the murmur of other conversations, the soft Christmas music playing overhead. None of it mattered. In this moment, there were just the two of them, recognizing each other in a way that had nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with survival. "This is the weirdest first date I've ever been on," the woman said finally, "and somehow also the best." Caleb felt warmth spread through his chest. "Yeah? I'm not completely bombing it? Not even a little bit." They lingered over dinner longer than necessary, ordering coffee they didn't need because neither of them wanted the evening to end. The woman told him about her sister's college plans, about the pressure of making sure she had every opportunity their mother would have wanted for her. Caleb shared his fears about raising a daughter alone, about all the questions he couldn't answer and the conversations he was dreading. "She asked me about boys last week," Caleb said, running a hand through his hair. "Boys? She's 8. I'm not ready for boys." The woman laughed. "Oh, you're definitely not ready. My sister is 15 and dating someone, and I still want to interrogate every kid who looks at her twice." "How do you handle it?" "Badly," she admitted with a grin. "I try to be cool and supportive, and then I end up giving lectures about self-respect and red flags. Nina thinks I'm ridiculous." "Nina? That's your sister?" "Yeah, Nina Monroe. She's brilliant and stubborn and absolutely exhausting." The woman's voice was full of affection. "Kind of like your Ellie sounds." They'd probably either be best friends or mortal enemies. "Is there a difference with teenage girls?" Caleb laughed again, and it felt good, natural, like maybe he was remembering how to be human after all. The waitress dropped off the check, and Caleb grabbed it before the woman could protest. "I was late," he said. "It's the least I can do." "All right, but I'm getting it next time." Next time. The words hung in the air between them, full of possibility and promise. Caleb met her eyes and found her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, hope mixed with something else, something uncertain. "I'd like that," Caleb said softly. "A next time." "Yeah?" "Yeah." They stood, gathering coats and gloves, moving in the synchronized awkwardness of people trying to figure out how a date was supposed to end. Outside, the snow had intensified, painting the world in white. Through the windows, Caleb could see his truck already buried under several inches of powder. "Looks like I'm going to need to dig out," he said. "Do you have a scraper?" "Somewhere in the truck, probably buried under Ellie's soccer gear and about 17 coffee cups." The woman smiled, then hesitated. They stood in the restaurant's entrance, the space between them charged with the question of what came next. A hug? A handshake? Nothing at all? Before Caleb could decide, the door burst open with such force that they both jumped back. A figure stumbled inside, bringing a gust of snow and freezing air with them. The figure straightened, breathing hard, and Caleb found himself looking at a woman he'd never seen before. She was shorter than the woman he'd been having dinner with dark hair plastered to her head and mascara running in black streaks down her cheeks. Her coat was soaked through, her jeans dark with melted snow. She was shaking, whether from cold or emotion, Caleb couldn't tell. "I'm so sorry," the newcomer gasped, her breath coming in ragged pulls. "I'm so sorry I'm late. My car, it died on Route 12, and I tried to call, but my phone was dead, and I couldn't get a signal anyway, and I walked." She broke off, looking around wildly. "Is there a Caleb Turner here? Please tell me he's still here. Please tell me he didn't leave." The world tilted sideways. Caleb felt his mouth go dry. "I'm Caleb Turner." The woman's eyes, dark brown, desperate, locked onto his. "Oh, thank God. I thought I'd missed you completely. I thought—" She pressed a hand to her chest, still trying to catch her breath. "I'm Rachel. Rachel Monroe. Your blind date." The words hit like a physical blow. Caleb's brain stuttered, trying to process what he was hearing. This woman was Rachel? But then who? He turned slowly to look at the woman he'd just spent the last 2 hours with, the woman he'd laughed with and opened up to and promised a second date. She had gone completely pale, her eyes wide with an expression that Caleb recognized immediately. Horror. "Oh no," she whispered. "Oh no, no, no." "You're not Rachel," Caleb said stupidly. "I thought—" The blonde woman pressed her hands to her face. "I thought you were my date, Mark Henderson. I was supposed to meet a Mark Henderson, and when the hostess brought you over and you said you were late and you were so apologetic, I just assumed, I'm not Mark Henderson." "I realize that now." They stared at each other, the full weight of the mistake crashing down on both of them. For 2 hours, they'd been on completely different dates. For 2 hours, they'd shared their grief and their fears and their hopes with total strangers who thought they were someone else. "This can't be happening," the woman, not Rachel, breathed. "This actually can't be happening." But it was happening, and standing in the doorway, dripping melted snow onto the restaurant's floor, the real Rachel Monroe watched them both with an expression Caleb couldn't begin to interpret. The hostess appeared, clipboard in hand, her professional smile firmly in place. "Is everything all right here?" "No," Caleb said. "Not remotely," not Rachel added. "I walked 6 miles through a snowstorm," Rachel, the real Rachel, said, and her voice was shaking now, exhaustion or anger or both. 6 miles. Because I promised I would be here. Because I don't break my promises." The accusation hung in the air, unspoken but clear. She'd kept her word. She'd fought through hell to show up. And she'd arrived to find her date having the time of his life with someone else. Caleb wanted to explain. He wanted to apologize, to make her understand that it was a mistake, a stupid, impossible mistake. But the words tangled in his throat, and all he could do was stand there like an idiot while 2 women looked at him with expressions that made him want to disappear into the floor. The not Rachel woman moved first. "I should go," she said quietly. "My actual date is probably... I need to check if Mark is still here. I need to..." She didn't finish the sentence, just grabbed her coat and fled toward the dining room, leaving Caleb alone with the woman who'd walked through a storm to meet him. Rachel Monroe looked like she'd been through a war. Her coat was dripping, her hair was a mess, and her eyes held an exhaustion that went bone deep. She was shorter than he'd expected, maybe 5'4", with sharp features that would have been striking if they weren't currently arranged in an expression of barely controlled fury and hurt. "Hi," Caleb said weakly. "I'm Caleb. I know who you are." Rachel's voice was flat. "I walked 6 miles remembering your name. It's the only thing that kept me going." "Your car broke down?" "On Route 12. Just died. No warning, no signs, just suddenly coasting to a stop in the middle of a snowstorm." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I tried to call you, but my phone was dead." I tried to call a tow truck, but there was no signal, so I walked. You walked 6 miles in this weather. What was I supposed to do? I promised I'd be here. Rachel's eyes glistened, and Caleb realized with horror that she was fighting back tears. I promised, and I don't break my promises, even when apparently the person I'm meeting doesn't care enough to wait. I did wait, Caleb protested. I was late too, and when I got here, the hostess brought over a woman who said she was waiting for me, and I just assumed— You assumed wrong. Obviously. They stood there in the entrance, snow melting into puddles around Rachel's boots, creating a small flood that the hostess was eyeing with increasing concern. Other customers were starting to stare, drawn by the drama unfolding in their Friday night dinner destination. Look, Caleb tried again. I know how this looks, but it was an honest mistake. I didn't mean to have a great time with someone who wasn't me, Rachel interrupted. Yeah, I noticed. You two looked pretty cozy when I walked in. We were just talking. For how long? Caleb hesitated. Maybe 2 hours? 2 hours. Rachel closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, something had shifted. The fire had gone out, replaced by a weariness that made her look 10 years older. I walked for 2 hours through a blizzard while you had a lovely dinner with someone else. That's perfect. That's exactly how my life goes. Rachel, don't. She held up a hand. Just don't. I'm wet, I'm freezing, I'm exhausted, and I apparently just humiliated myself for nothing. I'm going to call a tow truck, and then I'm going home, and we're going to pretend this never happened, okay? That's not fair, Caleb heard himself say. Rachel's eyebrows shot up. What's not fair? You're angry, and I get that. I would be too. But you can't just— He stopped, frustration building in his chest. You don't know what tonight has been for me. You don't know how hard it was for me to even show up. And you think it was easy for me? Rachel's voice rose, drawing more stares. You think I wanted to spend my Friday night getting set up on a blind date by my teenage sister? You think I wanted to drive through a storm and have my car die and walk until my feet went numb because I was raised to keep my word? Then why are you giving up so fast? The question seemed to surprise her. Rachel blinked, some of the anger draining from her face. What? You walked 6 miles through a blizzard, Caleb said, because you promised you'd be here. That's incredible. That's the most determined thing I've heard in years. But now you're just going to leave after all that? What exactly do you want me to do, Caleb? He didn't have an answer. Or rather, he had too many answers, all of them tangled up with the confusing emotions of the past 2 hours. The comfort he'd found with the wrong woman, the connection that had felt real even though it was based on a lie. The sudden fierce desire not to let this disaster end before it even began. Have dinner with me, he said finally. Rachel stared at him like he'd grown a second head. You want me to have dinner with you? Now? After you just spent 2 hours with someone else? Yes. Are you insane? Probably, Caleb admitted. But you're here. I'm here. And unless I'm completely misreading the situation, we're both here because people we love pushed us into taking a chance we weren't ready for. So maybe we should actually take it. Rachel looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Snow continued to melt off her coat, creating a growing puddle that was definitely going to get them kicked out soon. The hostess was hovering nearby, clearly trying to figure out how to handle the situation without causing a scene. I'm soaking wet, Rachel said finally. I noticed. I probably look like a drowned rat. A very determined drowned rat. That's not the compliment you think it is. Despite everything, Caleb felt a smile tug at his lips. Come on, sit down, warm up, have some coffee at least. You walked 6 miles to get here. You deserve more than just turning around and walking back. Rachel's expression wavered. He could see her weighing the options, pride battling against exhaustion, and maybe, just maybe, curiosity. Fine, she said at last, but I'm ordering the most expensive thing on the menu. Deal. The hostess, sensing resolution, swooped in with relief. Let me get you a table, she said to Rachel, professionally ignoring the small lake forming around her boots. And maybe some towels? Towels would be great, Rachel said dryly. As the hostess led them toward a different table, Caleb noted, far away from where he'd sat with not Rachel, he caught sight of the blonde woman across the dining room. She was sitting with a man who must be Mark Henderson, both of them leaning close in animated conversation. As if feeling his gaze, she looked up, and their eyes met across the crowded restaurant. She mouthed something that might have been "good luck," or "I'm sorry," or possibly "what is my life?" Caleb nodded in acknowledgement, feeling the surreal absurdity of the entire situation settle over him like a blanket. Then he turned his attention to the woman now sliding into the booth across from him, the real Rachel Monroe, who'd walked through hell because she'd made a promise, and who was now studying him with eyes that held equal parts skepticism and something that might eventually turn into forgiveness. "So," Rachel said, accepting a towel from a passing waitress and beginning to dry her hair, "this is officially the worst first date of my entire life." "Yeah," Caleb agreed. "Mine too. And yet here we are." "Here we are." Rachel paused in her toweling, her dark eyes fixed on his face. "Why did you ask me to stay?" It was a good question, an important question. Caleb thought about the answer, really thought about it, because this woman deserved honesty if nothing else. "Because," he said slowly, "in the past 2 hours, I talked to someone about things I haven't talked about in years." I laughed. I felt like maybe I could be a person again instead of just a dad running on empty. "And then you walked in, and I realized it was all based on a mistake. But the feelings weren't a mistake. The hope wasn't a mistake." He met her eyes. "And you walked 6 miles through a snowstorm. That says something about who you are. I want to know what else you have to say." Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, she reached across the table, not to take his hand, but to steal his water glass. She took a long drink, then set it down with a decisive click. "All right, Caleb Turner," she said. "Let's start over. Hi, I'm Rachel Monroe. I'm late because I'm an idiot who didn't check her car before driving into a blizzard. I'm a nurse who works too much. I'm raising my teenage sister alone, and I haven't been on a date since before my mom died 2 years ago. I'm terrified, exhausted, and I have no idea what I'm doing." Caleb felt something in his chest crack open. Not breaking, but opening. Like a door he'd kept locked was finally, tentatively swinging ajar. "Hi, Rachel," he said. "I'm Caleb Turner. I'm a widowed single dad who sat in his truck for 20 minutes before coming inside because I was convinced this would be a disaster. I build furniture for a living, I haven't slept through the night in 4 years, and my 8-year-old daughter is the only reason I'm here. I'm terrified, awkward, and I also have no idea what I'm doing." Rachel's lips twitched. "We're a mess, a complete mess," Caleb agreed. "This is never going to work." "Probably not. We should just call it a night and go home." "Absolutely." Neither of them moved. The waitress appeared slightly wary after the earlier drama. "Can I get you folks started with drinks?" Rachel looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at Rachel. Something passed between them. An understanding, maybe, or a challenge. A mutual acknowledgement that they were both here, both broken, both willing to see what happened next, even though logic said they should run. "Coffee," Rachel said. "The biggest cup you have." "Same," Caleb added. "And maybe some soup? You must be freezing." "I'm fine." "You're shivering." "Mind your own business." But she was smiling now, just a little, and Caleb felt an answering smile tug at his own lips. The waitress scribbled their order and disappeared, leaving them alone in a booth still damp with melted snow and the weight of everything that had just happened. "So," Rachel said, wrapping her hands around the warmth of the coffee cup the waitress quickly delivered. "Your daughter set this up?" "Ellie. She's 8 and terrifyingly competent. What about you? Who orchestrated this disaster from your end?" "My sister Nina and her entire group of scheming friends. They found your daughter's post on some community group and decided we were perfect for each other." Rachel's expression turned rueful. "They're probably going to be insufferable when they find out we actually met. Ellie's going to lose her mind. She's been texting me every 5 minutes asking how it's going." "What are you going to tell her?" Caleb considered the question. "The truth, I guess. That it was complicated and weird and nothing like what she probably imagined, but that I'm glad I came." "Are you?" Rachel asked quietly. "Glad you came?" He looked at her, really looked at her. She was still damp, still visibly exhausted, still carrying the weight of whatever had driven her to walk 6 miles through a snowstorm. But there was something in her eyes that recognized something in his, a shared understanding of what it meant to keep showing up even when everything in you wanted to quit. "Yeah," Caleb said. "Yeah, I am." Rachel held his gaze for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay then." "Okay." And as the snow continued to fall outside, two strangers who'd never actually met began the messy, complicated work of getting to know each other. For real this time. No more mistakes, no more wrong tables or confused identities. Just two people trying to remember how to be human. One honest conversation at a time. It wasn't the perfect first date. It wasn't even a good first date, by any conventional measure. But as Caleb listened to Rachel tell him about the car that betrayed her, and the shoes that were definitely ruined, and the moment she almost turned back but didn't, as he watched her smile grow, and her shoulders relax and the guardedness in her eyes slowly soften, he thought that maybe perfect was overrated anyway. Maybe what mattered was showing up, even when you were late, even when everything went wrong, even when you were terrified and broken and convinced you'd forgotten how to do this. Maybe showing up was enough. Outside, the storm raged on, burying cars and streets and all the places people thought they were supposed to be. But inside Henderson's steakhouse, in a booth still damp with snow, Caleb Turner and Rachel Monroe sat across from each other and did the bravest thing either of them had done in years. They stayed. The coffee had gone cold by the time Caleb noticed the restaurant was emptying around them. What had started as forced politeness between two strangers had evolved into something else entirely. A conversation that flowed like water finding its path, winding through topics neither of them had planned to discuss on a first date with someone they'd never met. Rachel had stopped shivering about an hour ago, her damp coat draped over the booth's edge, steam no longer rising from her shoulders. The soup Caleb had insisted she order sat half-finished, forgotten as she leaned forward on her elbows, telling him about the night her mother died. "Nina was only 13, Rachel said, her voice steady despite the weight of the words. "I was 23, barely keeping my own life together, and suddenly I'm responsible for a teenager who just lost the only parent she had left. Our dad walked out when she was 2. Don't even know where he is now." "That must have been terrifying," Caleb said. "Terrifying doesn't even begin to cover it." Rachel traced the rim of her coffee cup with one finger, eyes distant. "The first month I cried myself to sleep every single night. Nina would hear me through the walls and pretend she didn't. We were both trying to be strong for each other and failing spectacularly at it." Caleb understood that particular kind of failure intimately. Ellie did the same thing after Sarah died. She was only 4 and she'd creep into my room at night and just stand there watching me, waiting to see if I was going to fall apart completely. "Did you?" "Most days, yeah." The admission came easier than it should have, sitting across from this woman who'd walked through a storm to meet him. I'd get her off to preschool, come home, and just stare at the walls for hours. Couldn't work, couldn't eat, couldn't do anything but exist in this fog, where nothing felt real except the pain. Rachel nodded slowly, recognition flickering in her dark eyes. "How did you climb out of it?" "I didn't, not really. Ellie climbed out for both of us." Caleb smiled, though it hurt. "One day she came home with this drawing she'd made at school, just stick figures, her and me holding hands under a sun. And she said, 'This is us being happy again, Daddy. We just have to practice.' Like happiness was something you could rehearse for." Smart kid. The smartest. She saved my life, probably literally. Caleb paused, considering whether to continue, then decided he'd already gone this far. There were nights I'd think about just not waking up, about how much easier everything would be if I could just stop. And then I'd hear her breathing in the next room, and I'd remember she'd already lost one parent. I wouldn't do that to her. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with the kind of truth people usually kept locked away. Rachel didn't flinch from it. She just reached across the table and placed her hand over his, her palm warm against his knuckles. "I'm glad you stayed," she said simply. "Me too. Most days. That's all we can ask for, right? Most days." They sat like that for a moment, her hand on his, two people who understood that survival wasn't a straight line, but a messy zigzag of good days and terrible ones. The waitress approached their table, clearly wanting to drop off the check but hesitant to interrupt the moment. Rachel noticed first and withdrew her hand, the sudden absence of warmth making Caleb's skin feel cold. "We should probably go," Rachel said, glancing around at the nearly empty restaurant. "I think we've overstayed our welcome." Caleb checked his phone and nearly choked. It was past 11. They'd been talking for over 3 hours. "I didn't realize it was so late. Ellie's with my sister, but I should—" "Yeah, Nina's probably wondering if I died in the snow." Rachel's expression turned wry, which, given how tonight started, was a legitimate possibility. They gathered their things in the awkward shuffle of a date ending, neither quite sure what came next. Caleb paid the check over Rachel's protests, reminding her that she'd walked 6 miles while he'd been having dinner with the wrong woman, a fact that still made him wince with embarrassment. Outside, the snow had finally stopped, leaving the world buried under a blanket of white that sparkled under the parking lot lights. The temperature had dropped even further, their breath-forming clouds in the frozen air. Caleb's truck sat under what looked like a foot of fresh powder. Rachel's car, he realized, was still wherever it had died on Route 12. "You need a ride," Caleb said. It wasn't a question. "I need a lot of things. A new car, a vacation, a time machine to go back and check my battery before leaving the house." Rachel hugged her arms around herself, the damp coat providing little protection against the cold. "But yes, a ride would be appreciated." "Where do you live?" "Other side of town, Pine Ridge Apartments." That was a 20-minute drive in good weather. Tonight, with the roads like they were, it would take twice that long. Caleb should have felt annoyed or inconvenienced. Instead, he felt grateful for the extra time. "Come on," he said, fishing his keys from his pocket. "Let me dig us out first." The truck was buried worse than he'd thought. Caleb found his scraper wedged under the passenger seat and began the tedious work of clearing snow, while Rachel stood nearby, shivering but insisting she was fine. It took 15 minutes to clear enough to see out the windows, by which time Caleb's hands were numb and Rachel's teeth were chattering audibly. "Get in the truck," Caleb ordered. "I'll finish this." "I can help." "Rachel, get in the truck before you freeze to death. You've had enough disasters for one night." She must have been truly cold because she didn't argue, just climbed into the passenger seat and cranked the heat to maximum. Caleb finished clearing the snow, his mind wandering back to the conversation they'd been having. The easy way she'd shared her grief, the understanding in her eyes when he'd admitted his darkest thoughts, the warmth of her hand over his. He'd spent 2 hours with the wrong woman and felt connection. Now, 3 hours with the right woman, and he felt something more dangerous, something that scared him because it was real and complicated, and nothing like the simple companionship he'd convinced himself was all he needed. When he climbed into the driver's seat, Rachel had stopped shivering. She'd found an old blanket he kept in the back, probably covered in sawdust and Ellie's soccer practice dirt, and wrapped it around her shoulders without complaint. "Better?" Caleb asked, starting the engine. "Much. Though I think this blanket has seen better days." "It's seen better years, honestly, but it's warm." "Warm is all I care about right now." Caleb eased the truck out of the parking spot, tires crunching through packed snow. The roads were worse than he'd anticipated, barely plowed, slick with ice under the fresh powder. He drove slowly, both hands on the wheel, hyper-aware of Rachel sitting beside him. "Can I ask you something?" Rachel said after a few minutes of silence. "Sure." "The woman you were with before I showed up, the wrong date." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Did you like her?" The question caught Caleb off guard. He considered lying, then remembered the promise they'd made to each other to be honest, even when it hurt. "Yeah," he admitted. "I did. She was kind, and we talked about real things, and for the first time in years, I felt like maybe I wasn't completely broken." "That must have made it worse when you realized the mistake." "It did. Because for those 2 hours, I let myself believe something good was happening. And then you walked in and I realized it was all wrong. And I felt like the universe was punishing me for daring to hope." Caleb glanced at her, then back at the road. "But then we started talking. And I realized the universe wasn't punishing me. It was just really bad at matchmaking." Rachel laughed, the sound filling the truck's cabin. "That's one way to put it. Though in the universe's defense, we did end up meeting, just with some extra steps and severe frostbite." "How are your feet, by the way? You walk 6 miles in, what, those boots?" Rachel looked down at her feet with a grimace. These boots were cute, not practical. Pretty sure I have blisters on my blisters, but they'll heal. You should soak them in warm water when you get home, and maybe invest in winter boots that can actually handle Montana snow. Is that your professional carpenter opinion? That's my common sense opinion. Well, when you put it that way. Rachel shifted in her seat, turning to face him more fully. Can I ask you something else? You're on a roll. Go ahead. Why did you really ask me to stay? After everything that happened, after spending the whole evening with someone else, you could have just apologized and gone home. We could have both pretended this never happened, but you asked me to stay. Why? Caleb was quiet for a moment, navigating a turn that had his tires sliding slightly before catching traction. The question deserved a real answer, not a deflection. Because, he said finally, when you walked through that door, you looked like you'd been through hell. And your first thought wasn't about yourself. It was about whether you'd missed me, whether you'd broken a promise. He paused, remembering the desperation in her eyes. My wife used to say that character is what you do when things get hard. When your car breaks down and your phone dies and you have every excuse to quit. You kept your word anyway. That's the kind of person I want in my life. The kind of person I want Ellie to see me surrounded by. Rachel was quiet for so long that Caleb worried he'd said too much. Then she spoke, her voice soft. Your wife sounds like she was pretty wise. She was. About most things, anyway. She had terrible taste in movies and couldn't cook to save her life. But when it came to people, she always knew. Caleb felt the familiar ache in his chest. But it was different now, less sharp, more like an old wound that had learned to live with him. She would have liked you, I think. Yeah? Yeah, she always respected people who showed up, even when it was hard. They drove in companionable silence for a while, the truck's headlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating walls of white on either side of the narrow road. Caleb's phone buzzed in his pocket, probably Ellie or Marie checking in, but he ignored it. This moment felt important, fragile, like something that might shatter if he looked away. I was terrified tonight, Rachel said suddenly. Not of meeting you, but of trying again, of putting myself out there and maybe finding something good only to have it ripped away like everything else. I know the feeling. Nina keeps telling me I need to live my life, that Mom would want me to be happy, but every time I think about being happy, I feel guilty. Like I'm betraying her memory by moving forward. Does it help if I tell you I feel exactly the same way about Sarah? Rachel turned to look at him, her face half shadowed in the dashboard lights. Does it ever get easier? The guilt? I don't know yet, Caleb admitted. Child. Some days I can think about her and smile. Other days I can barely function. But Ellie told me something a few weeks ago that's been helping. She said, Mommy wouldn't want you to be sad forever, Daddy. She'd want you to be happy enough for both of you. She's 8 and she said that? She's 8 going on 40. Sounds like Nina, 15 going on 50. Rachel pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. She's the one who found your daughter's post, you know. She showed it to me and said, he's a single dad who lost his wife. You're basically a single parent who lost your mom. You're perfect for each other. Like grief was a matchmaking service. Maybe it is, in a weird way. Caleb navigated another turn, the truck sliding only slightly this time. We understand things other people don't. We know what it's like to smile on the outside while dying on the inside. To function when all you want to do is fall apart. That's depressing. But true.
But true, Rachel agreed with a sigh. God, we're a mess, aren't we? The absolute worst. And yet here we are, driving through a blizzard at midnight, talking about dead people and guilt and all the ways we're broken. Romantic, isn't it? Rachel laughed again, and Caleb realized he was collecting those laughs like treasures. Each one felt like a small victory, proof that despite everything, the wrong date, the broken car, the 6-mile walk through hell, something good was happening here. They passed through the empty downtown, storefronts dark except for scattered Christmas lights that cast colored shadows on the snow. Caleb caught Rachel staring out the window at a display of Santa and his reindeer, her expression unreadable. Do you hate Christmas? He asked. Hate is a strong word. Rachel kept her eyes on the window. Let's say Christmas and I have a complicated relationship. Mom died December 18th, 2 years ago tomorrow, actually.
Caleb's hands tightened on the wheel. I'm sorry. I didn't know. How could you? We just met. She turned back to face him. But yeah, Christmas is hard. Nina tries to make it nice, decorates the apartment, and bakes cookies, and pretends like we're a normal family celebrating a normal holiday. And I play along because she needs that. But inside, I'm just counting down the days until January when I can stop pretending. Sarah died December 22nd. The words fell between them like stones. Rachel's eyes widened. Seriously? 4 years ago next week. Car accident on her way home from buying Ellie's presents. Black ice, wrong place, wrong time. Gone before I could get to the hospital. Caleb's voice was steady, though his chest felt tight. So yeah, Christmas and I also have a complicated relationship. I don't even know what to say. There's nothing to say. It just is what it is. Caleb took a breath, forcing himself to continue. Ellie doesn't remember much about that Christmas. She was too young, but she knows it's when her mom died, and she knows I hate December now, and she tries so hard to make it okay for me. Just like Nina does for me. Just like that. They looked at each other, understanding passing between them without words. Two people trapped in the same nightmare, just slightly different versions. Two people trying to survive a season that kept taking everything they loved. We're quite the pair, Rachel said softly. That's what I keep thinking. Is that good or bad? Caleb considered the question. I don't know yet. Ask me again when we're not both emotionally raw and exhausted. Deal. The GPS announced they were approaching Pine Ridge Apartments. Caleb felt a pang of disappointment. He wasn't ready for the evening to end, despite how disastrously it had started. He pulled into the complex, following Rachel's directions to a building near the back. This is me, Rachel said, pointing to a unit on the second floor. Lights were on in the windows, suggesting Nina was still awake. Thank you for the ride. And for dinner. And for not running away when I showed up looking like a drowned rat. Thank you for not running away when you realized I'd spent 2 hours with the wrong person. To be fair, I considered it. But you stayed. But I stayed, Rachel confirmed. She made no move to get out of the truck, and Caleb made no move to suggest she should. They sat there in the parking lot, engine running, heat blasting, neither ready to face what came next. Can I ask you one more thing? Rachel said. Sure. Do you want to do this again? On purpose this time, with actual planning and working cars and no mistaken identities? Caleb felt something warm unfurl in his chest. Yeah, I'd like that. Even though we're both disasters? Especially because we're both disasters. At least we understand each other. Rachel smiled, and it transformed her face, made her look younger, lighter, like maybe the weight she carried wasn't quite so heavy. Okay then. How about tomorrow? Tomorrow? Too soon? No, it's... Caleb stopped, reality crashing back. Actually, tomorrow is Ellie's Christmas pageant. She's been practicing for weeks. I can't miss it. Of course not. That's important. But you could come if you wanted. The words were out before Caleb could think them through. I mean, it's just an elementary school thing, probably terrible, but Ellie would love to meet you. And it might be nice to have someone there who understands why I'm going to be a wreck the whole time. Rachel's eyes widened. You want me to meet your daughter on our second date? Technically, it would still be our first date, since tonight was such a disaster. Caleb. Rachel. That's a lot. Meeting your kid, that's serious. I know. And he did know. He knew it was too fast, too much, too soon. But sitting there in his truck with this woman who'd walked through a storm because she kept her promises, Caleb couldn't bring himself to care about the rules of normal dating. But nothing about tonight has been normal. And if we're going to try this, I want to be honest from the start. Ellie's my life. She comes first, always. If you can't handle that, better to know now. Rachel was quiet, her fingers playing with the edge of the borrowed blanket. Caleb held his breath, waiting for her to make an excuse, to say it was too much too fast, to disappear like everyone else who'd tried to get close, and realize that dating a widowed father meant competing with a ghost and an 8-year-old girl who'd already lost one mother. What time? Rachel asked finally. What? The pageant. What time? 7. At Henderson Elementary. It's the same building as the steakhouse. I know where it is. Rachel's smile was back, tentative but real. I'll be there, and I'll bring Nina if that's okay. She's been dying to meet the girl who set all this up anyway. Ellie's gonna lose her mind. Good. She deserves to see that her matchmaking actually worked. Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in 4 years. Anticipation. Not dread of what was coming, but actual excitement about tomorrow, about seeing Rachel again, about introducing her to Ellie, about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this disaster of a night was the beginning of something good. I should go, Rachel said, though she still didn't move. Nina's probably watching from the window, taking notes for her next interrogation. My sister does the same thing. Must be a guardian thing. Probably. Rachel finally reached for the door handle, then paused. Caleb? Yeah? I'm glad I walked through that storm, even though my feet are killing me and I probably look like I lost a fight with a snowbank. I'm glad I kept going. Me too. She opened the door, letting in a blast of cold air, and climbed out of the truck. Before closing the door, she leaned back in, her eyes bright in the dome light. See you tomorrow? Tomorrow, Caleb confirmed. Rachel shut the door and hurried toward her building, the borrowed blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. Caleb watched until she reached her door, saw her wave once before disappearing inside. Only then did he put the truck in reverse, his heart beating faster than it should. The drive to his sister's house to pick up Ellie passed in a blur. Caleb's mind was racing, replaying the entire evening, the wrong woman, the right woman, the confessions, and the laughter, and the way Rachel's hand had felt over his. The sheer insanity of inviting her to Ellie's pageant tomorrow, to the event that had been eating at him for weeks because it fell on the anniversary of Sarah's death. But somehow, knowing Rachel would be there made it feel bearable. She understood. She got it. She wouldn't expect him to be fine or whole or anything other than what he was, a grieving father trying his best to show up for his kid even when every cell in his body wanted to curl up and hide. Marie's house was still lit up when Caleb pulled into the driveway. His sister met him at the door before he could knock, her expression caught between curiosity and concern. How did it go? Marie asked, pulling him inside. You've been gone for hours. I was starting to worry. It was... Caleb stopped, trying to find words that could possibly capture the chaos. Complicated. Complicated good or complicated bad? Both? Neither? I honestly don't know yet. Marie studied his face, then her eyes widened. You like her? I just met her. You like her, Marie repeated, grinning now. Oh my God, you actually like her. This is amazing. Tell me everything. There's nothing to tell. We had dinner, we talked, I'm seeing her again tomorrow. Tomorrow? Caleb, that's... Wait, tomorrow is Ellie's pageant. I know. And you invited your date to Ellie's pageant? On the anniversary of... Marie stopped herself, but the words hung in the air anyway. On the anniversary of Sarah's death. I know what tomorrow is, Caleb said quietly. Trust me, I know. But Rachel, she gets it. Her mom died around Christmas too. She understands why tomorrow is going to be hard, and somehow that makes it easier. Marie's expression softened. Okay, if you think she's worth it. I don't know if she's worth it. I barely know her, but I want to find out. Then that's enough. Marie pulled him into a hug, quick and fierce. I'm proud of you, little brother, for trying. Don't get too excited. I'll probably screw it up. Probably, but at least you're trying. Ellie appeared at the top of the stairs, already in her pajamas, but wide awake. Daddy! How was your date? Did you like her? Is she nice? Are you going to marry her? Caleb couldn't help but laugh. Slow down, Bug. It was one date. But did you like her? Ellie bounced down the stairs, her eyes bright with hope that made Caleb's chest ache. Yeah, he admitted. I liked her. Ellie threw her arms around his waist, squeezing tight. I knew it. I knew you would. Nina said her sister was perfect for you, and she was right. Speaking of Nina, Caleb said, extracting himself from Ellie's grip, how would you feel about them coming to your pageant tomorrow? Ellie's shriek of joy was probably heard 3 houses down. Marie laughed, covering her ears.
while Caleb just held his daughter and tried not to think about how tomorrow would mark 4 years since Sarah had held her last. "Can we go now?" Ellie asked, already halfway to the door. "I need to get home and practice my lines again." "It's almost midnight, Bug." "So? I'm not tired." But she was asleep before they made it halfway home, curled up in the back seat with her pageant angel costume clutched in her arms. Caleb carried her inside, tucked her into bed, and stood in her doorway for a long moment, watching her breathe. "I think I met someone, baby girl," he whispered. "Someone who might understand us. Is that okay?" Ellie didn't answer, lost in whatever dreams 8-year-olds had. But Caleb could have sworn he felt something, a warmth, a presence, a sense of approval from somewhere beyond the walls of their small house. Sarah would have wanted this for him. She would have wanted him to try. In his pocket, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Made it inside without falling on my face. Feet survived, dignity did not. Thanks again for tonight, for all of it. See you tomorrow." Rachel Caleb stared at the message, then saved her number before typing a reply. "Glad you survived. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be chaos." Her response came almost immediately. "Can't wait. Good night, Caleb." "Good night, Rachel." He stood there in Ellie's doorway, phone in hand, and let himself feel something he'd thought was gone forever. Not happiness, not yet. That felt too big, too dangerous. But possibility. The tentative, terrifying possibility that maybe life wasn't over after all. That maybe showing up meant more than just surviving. That maybe, just maybe, walking through storms was worth it when you found someone waiting on the other side. Outside, the snow had started again, soft flakes drifting past the window. Tomorrow would bring the pageant and the anniversary and all the grief that came with both. But it would also bring Rachel. Rachel who kept her promises. Rachel who understood loss. Rachel who'd looked at his broken pieces and hadn't run away. That had to count for something. It had to be enough to keep trying. And for the first time in 4 years, Caleb thought maybe it was. The morning of December 22nd arrived with the kind of cruel brightness that made grief feel even heavier. Sunlight streamed through Caleb's bedroom window, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like they had no idea what day this was. 4 years ago, Sarah had been alive when this light touched the world. By nightfall, she'd been gone. Caleb lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to move. His alarm had gone off 20 minutes ago. Ellie would be awake soon, bouncing with excitement about the pageant, and he'd have to pretend his insides weren't being torn apart. He'd have to smile and make breakfast and help her with her costume and act like this was just another day instead of the anniversary of the moment his entire world had shattered. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Rachel. "Still okay if we come tonight? Nina's asking what to wear, and I realized I never confirmed." Caleb picked up the phone, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. This was his out. He could cancel, tell Rachel he wasn't feeling well, retreat into the safety of grief that didn't require him to perform for anyone. She'd understand. She, of all people, would understand. Instead, he typed, "Still okay. Ellie's been talking about nothing else since I told her. Fair warning, she's going to interrogate you both." Rachel's response came quickly. "We can handle it." Nina's been practicing her cool teenager face all morning. "How's that going?" "Terribly. She looks constipated." Despite everything, Caleb smiled. He sent back a thumbs-up emoji and forced himself out of bed. One foot in front of the other. That's what his therapist had told him after Sarah died. You don't have to climb the whole mountain. Just take one step. Then another. Eventually, you'll look back and realize you've moved. 4 years of steps. Some days he still felt like he was standing at the base, staring up at an impossible climb. "Daddy!" Ellie's voice carried down the hallway, full of the kind of joy that only 8-year-olds could muster before 7 in the morning. "Daddy, it's pageant day." "I know, Bug," Caleb called back, pulling on yesterday's jeans. "Come here for a second." Ellie appeared in his doorway, already dressed in her regular clothes with her angel costume draped over her arm. Her hair was a disaster, sticking up in 6 different directions, but her smile was radiant. "Can you help me with my hair?" she asked. "I want it to look perfect for when Rachel and Nina see me." The mention of Rachel's name sent a jolt through Caleb's system.
He'd invited a woman he barely knew to the worst day of his year. What had he been thinking? "Sure, Bug. Come sit." Caleb guided Ellie to the edge of his bed and began attempting to tame her wild curls. Sarah had always been better at this. She'd known exactly how to braid and twist and make Ellie's hair look presentable. Caleb's attempts usually ended with Ellie looking like she'd stuck her finger in a socket. "Are you sad today?" Ellie asked quietly, her voice losing some of its earlier brightness. Caleb's hand stilled in her hair. "Why do you ask that?" "Because it's the day Mommy died. Aunt Marie told me you might be extra sad today." Of course Marie had warned her. His sister knew him too well, knew he'd try to hide it and fail spectacularly. "Yeah, Bug. I'm sad today, but I'm also happy because I get to watch you in your pageant." "You can be both?" "You can absolutely be both. Humans are complicated like that." Ellie was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then she twisted around to look at him, her brown eyes, Sarah's eyes, serious and searching. "Is that why you wanted Rachel to come? Because she makes you less sad?" The question hit Caleb square in the chest. "I don't know yet, baby. I only just met her. But she understands what it's like to miss someone you love. That helps, I think." "I miss Mommy too," Ellie said softly. "I know you do. But I think Mommy would like Rachel. She always said you needed someone who could make you laugh when you wanted to cry." Caleb pulled Ellie into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. 4 years old when Sarah died, and yet somehow she remembered things like that. Somehow she carried her mother's wisdom in ways that broke Caleb's heart and stitched it back together in the same breath. "You're too smart for 8, he murmured into her hair. "I know," Ellie said, her voice muffled against his shirt. "It's exhausting." They stayed like that for a long moment, father and daughter holding each other on the worst day of the year, finding comfort in the only arms that truly understood their loss. Then Ellie pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Okay, enough sad stuff. We have a pageant to get ready for." She bounced off the bed, her resilience both inspiring and heartbreaking. "And I need to practice my lines one more time. Did you know I have 3 whole sentences to say? That's more than anyone else in my class." "I did know that. You've told me approximately 4,000 times. Good. Then you'll know them well enough to prompt me if I forget." Caleb spent the rest of the morning in a haze of activity that kept the grief at bay. Breakfast, dishes, helping Ellie practice her lines, triple-checking that her costume was perfect. His sister called twice to check on him. His mother-in-law sent a text that simply said, "Thinking of you today," with a heart emoji that made his eyes burn. By afternoon, Caleb found himself standing in his bedroom closet, staring at his clothes like they held the answers to questions he didn't know how to ask. What did you wear to your daughter's Christmas pageant on the anniversary of your wife's death when you were also trying to make a good impression on the woman you'd just started dating? He settled on a dark blue button-down Sarah had bought him 3 Christmases ago. It still smelled faintly of her perfume, or maybe that was just his imagination. Either way, it felt right. His phone buzzed. "Marie, how are you holding up?" "I'm fine," he typed back, the lie so automatic it didn't even register as dishonest. Liar. "Want me to come early? I can sit with you until it starts." "No, I need to do this alone." "You're not alone. Rachel's going to be there." The reminder sent another jolt through him. In a few hours, he'd see her again. In a few hours, she'd meet Ellie. In a few hours, he'd find out if last night had been real or just a product of emotional exhaustion and desperation. "That's what I'm afraid of," he admitted to his sister. "She walked 6 miles through a blizzard to meet you. I think she can handle one school pageant. It's not about handling it. It's about whether I can handle her being there on today of all days." Marie's response took longer this time. When it came, it was just, "Sarah would want you to try." Caleb stared at the message until his vision blurred. Then he pocketed his phone and went to find his daughter. The elementary school gymnasium was already packed when they arrived at 6:30. Parents crowded onto bleachers, phones, and cameras at the ready. Someone had strung lights around the makeshift stage at the far end, and a plastic nativity scene sat center stage, waiting for the student performers to bring it to life. Caleb found a seat in the middle section, saving space beside him for Rachel and Nina. Ellie had been whisked away backstage with the other angels, her face glowing with excitement. Around him, families laughed and chatted, completely unaware that 4 years ago today, his wife had died buying presents for the daughter who was about to perform in a pageant Sarah would never see. The grief hit him in waves. He'd known it would. Anniversaries were always brutal. But being here, in this crowd of happy families, made it worse. Everyone else got to go home to complete units. Caleb would go home to an empty house and a daughter who tried too hard to fill the silence. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" Caleb looked up to find Rachel standing in front of him, and the grief receded just enough for him to breathe. She'd dressed simply, jeans and a green sweater that brought out flecks of color in her dark eyes. Her hair was down, falling in waves around her shoulders, and she was smiling tentatively, like she wasn't sure of her welcome. "It's saved for you," Caleb said, standing up. "You made it." "I said I would." Rachel gestured to the teenage girl beside her, tall, dark-haired, with the kind of studied indifference only 15-year-olds could pull off. "This is my sister Nina. Nina, this is Caleb." "Hey," Nina said, giving him a once-over that was probably supposed to be subtle, but wasn't. "So you're the guy my sister walked 6 miles for." "Nina," Rachel's cheeks flushed. "What? I'm just stating facts." Caleb found himself smiling despite the heaviness in his chest. "Nice to meet you, Nina. Thanks for coming." "Thanks for inviting us. Ellie's been texting me all day. She's really excited." Nina pulled out her phone, showing him a string of messages filled with exclamation points and emojis. "She wants to know if we can all get ice cream after." "It's December 22nd. Who gets ice cream in December?" "People who are 8 and don't care about frostbite," Rachel said, settling into the seat beside Caleb. Their shoulders brushed, sending warmth through his arm. "How are you doing? Today must be hard." The question was quiet enough that only Caleb could hear. He appreciated that, the acknowledgement without making a scene, the understanding that he might be falling apart under his calm exterior. "I'm managing," he said honestly. "Having you here helps." "Yeah?" "Yeah. Gives me something to focus on besides—" He gestured vaguely, unable to finish the sentence. Rachel's hand found his under the pretense of adjusting her coat, her fingers curling around his palm for just a second before withdrawing. The touch was brief but grounding, a reminder that he wasn't alone in this gymnasium full of strangers. "Ellie's going to be amazing," Rachel said. "She told me she has 3 whole lines." "She told everyone she has 3 whole lines. The mailman knows, the grocery store clerk knows. I'm pretty sure she told my barber last week." "As she should. 3 lines is a big deal." Nina leaned across Rachel. "Is she the one in the back row? Dark curly hair? Looks like she's about to vibrate out of her skin?" Caleb followed her gaze to where the angels were filing onto stage. Sure enough, Ellie was in the back row, practically bouncing on her toes, her wings askew and her halo tilted at an angle that suggested it would fall off at any moment. "That's her," Caleb said, his throat tight. "She looks exactly like you," Rachel observed. "She looks like her mother." The words came out heavier than Caleb intended. Rachel glanced at him, sympathy flickering in her eyes. But she didn't say anything. She just shifted slightly closer, her presence a steady warmth against his side. The lights dimmed. The pageant began. Caleb watched Ellie perform with the other children, his vision blurring in and out of focus. She said her lines perfectly, her voice clear and confident. She remembered all her cues. She looked so happy up there, so alive and bright, and everything Sarah should have been here to see. When Ellie's scene ended and she stepped back into the angel chorus, Caleb felt Rachel's hand slip into his again. This time she didn't let go. She just held on, her thumb brushing small circles against his palm, anchoring him to the present moment instead of letting him drown in the past. "She's incredible," Rachel whispered. "She's everything," Caleb whispered back. The pageant continued, shepherds and wise men, and a very confused-looking first grader playing baby Jesus. Parents filmed and photographed, oohing and awing at appropriate moments. Beside Caleb, Nina was filming on her phone, probably sending clips to Ellie in real time. When the final scene concluded and the children took their bows, the gymnasium erupted in applause. Caleb stood with everyone else, clapping until his hands hurt, watching his daughter beam under the lights. Sarah should have been here for this. She should have been standing beside him, crying happy tears, already planning what to say to Ellie backstage. But Sarah wasn't here. Rachel was. The thought felt disloyal and comforting in equal measure. Parents began filing toward the backstage area to collect their children. Caleb led Rachel and Nina through the crowd, acutely aware of the curious looks they were getting. Small town meant everyone knew everyone's business, and Caleb showing up with a woman who wasn't Sarah, even 4 years later, would be tomorrow's gossip. "People are staring," Rachel murmured. "I know. Ignore them." "That doesn't bother you?" "Everything bothers me today, but them less than other things." They found Ellie surrounded by her classmates, still wearing her costume, wings now even more crooked than before. When she spotted Caleb, her face lit up. When she spotted Rachel and Nina, she actually shrieked. "You came!" Ellie launched herself at Rachel, who caught her with a surprised laugh. "You actually came! Did you see me? Did you see my lines? I didn't mess up at all." "You were perfect," Rachel said, returning Ellie's hug. "Absolutely perfect. Best angel I've ever seen." "Really? Would I lie about something that important?" Ellie pulled back, studying Rachel's face with the intensity of a child trying to determine if an adult was being truthful. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she smiled wider and turned to Nina. "And you must be Nina. I've heard so much about you. Do you really have a boyfriend? What's he like? Is he nice? Does he treat you well?" Nina blinked, clearly not expecting the interrogation. Yeah, his name's Tyler. He's on the basketball team." "Basketball is cool. My friend Jenny likes basketball. She says she's going to play professionally someday. I think she can do it if she tries hard enough." Ellie grabbed Nina's hand without asking permission. "Do you want to see my classroom? I have a science project about volcanoes up on the wall." "Ellie," Caleb interrupted gently, "maybe Nina doesn't want to see your classroom right now. It's late and—" "I want to see it," Nina said, surprising everyone. She glanced at Rachel, who nodded encouragement. "Lead the way, kid." Ellie dragged Nina off down the hallway, leaving Caleb and Rachel standing in the backstage chaos. Parents were helping children out of costumes, teachers were trying to restore order, and someone's mother was crying happy tears in the corner. "Sorry about that," Caleb said. "Ellie doesn't really do subtle." "I like her. She's honest." Rachel watched the two girls disappear around a corner. Nina needs more people like that in her life. People who just say what they're thinking without all the teenage drama. "How's Nina doing? With everything?" Rachel's expression clouded. "Some days are better than others. She's brilliant, straight A's, full scholarship potential, but she's also carrying so much grief. She acts tough, but I know she cries herself to sleep sometimes. I can hear her through the walls." That's how Ellie was for the first year. Now she's just manic. Like if she stays busy enough, she won't have to feel anything. Sounds familiar. They stood in the emptying hallway, two people surrounded by celebration while carrying private sorrows. A teacher walked past, giving Caleb a sympathetic smile that said she knew what day this was. He nodded in acknowledgement, grateful she didn't stop to talk. "I'm glad you came," Caleb said quietly. "Where else would I be?" "Anywhere but here. You barely know me. You had every excuse to bail." Rachel turned to face him fully, her expression serious. "I keep my promises, remember? That's kind of my thing. Besides, I wanted to be here. For you, for Ellie, for whatever this is that we're trying to figure out." "What are we trying to figure out?" "Honestly, I have no idea. But I want to find out." Before Caleb could respond, Ellie and Nina returned, both laughing about something. Ellie had removed her wings but still wore her halo, now perched at an even more precarious angle. "Can we get ice cream now?" Ellie asked. "Please? Nina said she knows a place that's open late." "It's freezing outside," Caleb protested. "So? Ice cream tastes better when it's cold." "That makes no sense." "It makes perfect sense. Right, Rachel?" Rachel held up her hands in surrender. "I'm staying out of this one, but for the record, I could go for ice cream." "See? Rachel agrees with me. We have to go now." Caleb looked at the three of them. His daughter, vibrating with excitement, Nina, fighting a smile, Rachel, watching him with warmth in her eyes, and felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't how he'd imagined spending this evening. He'd thought he'd suffer through the pageant alone, drive home, tuck Ellie into bed, and then fall apart in private like he did every year. But here was an alternative. Here was laughter and light, and the possibility of making new memories instead of just drowning in old ones. "Fine," he said, "but I'm not responsible when everyone gets brain freeze." Ellie cheered. Nina pumped her fist. Rachel grinned at him with an expression that said she knew exactly what he'd just chosen and why it mattered. They ended up at a local ice cream shop that somehow survived Montana winters through sheer stubbornness and excellent marketing. The place was nearly empty. Most people had more sense than to eat frozen desserts in December, but the owner greeted them warmly and didn't even blink at the odd grouping. Ellie ordered a triple scoop of chocolate that was bigger than her head. Nina got mint chip. Rachel chose strawberry. Caleb stuck with vanilla, because today wasn't the day to be adventurous with ice cream choices. They crowded into a booth, Ellie and Nina on one side, Caleb and Rachel on the other. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by Ellie's nonstop chatter about the pageant and Nina's dry observations that made even Caleb laugh. "So you really walked 6 miles in the snow?" Ellie asked Rachel, eyes wide. "That's so brave. I would have given up after like 10 minutes. "I thought about giving up about 100 times, Rachel admitted, "but I'd promised your dad I'd be there, and I don't break promises." "That's what Daddy always says too. He says keeping your word is the most important thing you can do." "Your dad's right." Ellie beamed, clearly delighted that Rachel agreed with Caleb on something. "Are you going to date my daddy?" The question dropped like a bomb. Nina choked on her ice cream. Caleb felt his face flame. Rachel, to her credit, didn't even flinch. "Ellie," Caleb started, "that's not an appropriate—" "I'd like to," Rachel interrupted, still looking at Ellie. "If your dad wants to date me, and if you're okay with it." Ellie's eyes went even wider. "Really? You mean it?" "I mean it. But it's important to me that you're comfortable with it. You and your dad are a team. I wouldn't want to mess that up." "You wouldn't mess it up. You'd make it better. Right, Daddy?" All three of them turned to look at Caleb. He sat there, ice cream melting in his bowl, trying to find words that didn't feel like betrayal or surrender or both. "I think," he said carefully, "that we're all still figuring this out. But yeah, Bug, Rachel would make things better." Ellie's smile could have lit up the entire shop. "Then it's settled. You're dating now." "That's not exactly how dating works," Nina pointed out. "There's usually more than one date involved." "Well, they can have more dates. They can have 1,000,000 dates. And maybe Rachel and Nina can come to our house for Christmas." The suggestion hung in the air. Caleb felt his chest tighten. Christmas, the day after tomorrow, the holiday he'd been dreading for weeks. Having people over felt impossible. Having Rachel and Nina over felt terrifying. "Ellie, I don't think—" he started. "We'd love to," Rachel said. Caleb stared at her. "What?" "We'd love to come for Christmas, if you'll have us." Rachel met his gaze, and he saw the understanding there. She knew what she was offering. She knew what it meant. "Nina and I don't have any other plans. It would be nice to spend it with people who understand." "Are you sure?" Caleb's voice came out rough. "I'm sure." Nina looked between them, then shrugged. "Works for me. Our apartment's depressing anyway. At least this way Ellie can explain all her Christmas traditions to me." "I have so many traditions." Ellie practically vibrated with excitement. "We make pancakes shaped like snowmen and watch movies and open presents, and Daddy always burns the cookies, but we eat them anyway because they still taste good even when they're black." "Sounds perfect," Rachel said softly, her eyes never leaving Caleb's face. They finished their ice cream in a blur of conversation and laughter. Caleb felt like he was watching the scene from outside his body. His daughter happy, a woman he barely knew making promises about Christmas, a teenage girl texting her boyfriend about the weird but cool evening she was having. This wasn't his life. His life was grief and routine and trying not to fall apart. This was something else entirely. Something that scared him because it felt too good to be real. When they finally left the shop, the temperature had dropped even further. Their breath formed clouds in the frozen air, and fresh snow had started to fall. Light, delicate flakes that caught in Rachel's hair like tiny stars. "I'll walk you to your car," Caleb said. "It's right there." Rachel pointed to a sedan parked 3 spots away. "But I'll let you anyway." Nina and Ellie ran ahead, already deep in conversation about something that involved a lot of giggling. Caleb and Rachel walked slowly, close enough that their arms brushed with each step. Thank you for tonight, Caleb said. For being here, for meeting Ellie, for agreeing to Christmas even though I know that's asking a lot. You're not asking anything I'm not willing to give. Rachel stopped walking, turning to face him. Snow caught in her eyelashes, making her look younger, softer. I meant what I said in there. I want to try this, whatever this is. Even though it's messy and complicated and we're both carrying more baggage than any sane person would deal with. What if I can't do it? What if I wake up tomorrow and panic and tell you Christmas is off? Then we'll figure it out, together. Rachel reached up, her gloved hand cupping his cheek. You don't have to be perfect, Caleb. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to show up and be honest. That's all I'm asking for. I can do that, Caleb said, though he wasn't entirely sure it was true. Good. Rachel smiled, then glanced over at Nina and Ellie, who were watching them with identical expressions of poorly concealed interest. I think we have an audience. We definitely have an audience. Should we give them something to talk about? Before Caleb could ask what she meant, Rachel stood on her tiptoes and pressed a quick, soft kiss to his cheek. It was brief, barely more than a brush of lips against skin, but it sent electricity through his entire body. Good night, Caleb, Rachel said, stepping back. See you Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve, Caleb echoed, his hand rising to touch the spot where her lips had been. Rachel collected Nina, who was grinning like she'd just won the lottery, and they climbed into the sedan. Caleb stood in the parking lot with Ellie, watching them drive away, snow falling all around them like the world was being remade in white. I really like her, Daddy, Ellie said, slipping her small hand into his. Me too, Bug. Do you think Mommy would like her? The question should have hurt. Maybe it did hurt. But standing there in the snow, with his daughter's hand in his and the ghost of Rachel's kiss still warm on his cheek, Caleb found he could answer honestly. Yeah, he said. I think Mommy would love her. They drove home through streets transformed by snow, past houses decorated with lights, past the cemetery where Sarah was buried under 4 years of weather and grief. Caleb didn't stop like he usually did on this night. He just drove past, one hand on the wheel, the other holding his daughter's, and let himself imagine a future that included more than just survival. When they got home, Ellie went straight to bed, exhausted from excitement. Caleb tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and stood in her doorway watching her sleep like he did every night. I'm trying, Sarah, he whispered to the darkness. I'm really trying. There was no answer, there never was. But Caleb thought maybe he felt something, approval or permission, or just the memory of a love that had shaped him into someone who could recognize it when it appeared again, wearing a different face and walking through different storms. His phone buzzed, a text from Rachel. Made it home. Nina hasn't stopped talking about Ellie. I think they're going to be trouble together. Caleb smiled, typing back, definitely trouble. The best kind. Can't wait for Christmas. Nina's already planning what to bake. Ellie's already planning a full itinerary of activities. Fair warning, she doesn't believe in downtime. Perfect. Neither do I. Caleb stared at his phone, at this woman who'd crashed into his life with all the subtlety of a blizzard and somehow made him believe in possibilities he'd thought were gone forever. Tomorrow was December 23rd. The day after was Christmas Eve, and Rachel and Nina would be in his house, meeting his family, becoming part of traditions that had felt hollow for 4 years. It should have terrified him. Instead, for the first time since Sarah died, Caleb felt something that might have been hope. He typed one more message. Thank you. For everything. Rachel's response came immediately. Thank you for letting us in. And there, in the quiet of his empty house, on the worst day of the worst season of his life, Caleb Turner allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the worst was finally over. That maybe showing up was enough. That maybe love was patient enough to wait until you were ready to try again. Christmas Eve morning arrived with the kind of chaos that only an 8-year-old on a mission could create. Caleb woke to the sound of Ellie rummaging through the kitchen, pots and pans clanging with enough volume to wake the entire neighborhood. He checked his phone, 6:30 in the morning, and groaned. Ellie, what are you doing? He called from his bedroom. Making snowman pancakes. Rachel and Nina are coming over and everything has to be perfect. Caleb dragged himself out of bed, following the sounds of destruction to find his kitchen transformed into what looked like a flower bomb had detonated. Ellie stood on a step stool at the counter, covered head to toe in white powder, attempting to mix batter in a bowl that was far too large for her small hands. Bug, they're not coming until this afternoon. I know, that's why I need to start now. There's so much to do. Ellie gestured wildly with the whisk, sending droplets of batter across the counter. We need pancakes and decorations, and I want to make cookies, even though you always burn them, and we need to wrap the presents I made for them and… Breathe, Caleb interrupted, gently taking the whisk from her hand. How about I make the pancakes, and you can be in charge of decorations? Deal? Ellie's face scrunched up as she considered this. But you don't know how to make them look like snowmen. Then you can supervise and tell me what to do. Okay, but you have to listen to my instructions exactly, or they'll look weird. For the next hour, Caleb found himself following the detailed commands of a third grader while attempting to create pancakes that vaguely resembled snowmen. Most of them looked more like misshapen blobs, but Ellie declared them acceptable after adding chocolate chip buttons and carrot noses made from orange-tinted icing. These are perfect, Ellie announced, surveying their work with satisfaction. Rachel's going to love them. We're eating these now, Bug. Rachel won't see them. Ellie's face fell. But I wanted to show her. So we'll make more when she gets here, together, all four of us. The idea seemed to placate her. They ate breakfast surrounded by the controlled chaos of Ellie's decorating supplies, construction paper and glitter, and enough glue to seal the floor permanently. Caleb's phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from Marie, who wanted to know every detail about yesterday and was threatening to accidentally stop by to meet Rachel if Caleb didn't provide satisfactory information. She's coming over today with her sister, Caleb typed back. You can meet her another time. Today works great. What time? Marie, no. Marie, yes. I'm your sister. I have vetting rights. You're going to scare her away. If she scares that easily, she's not right for you anyway. See you at 2. Caleb stared at his phone in defeat. There was no stopping Marie when she decided on something. He'd just have to warn Rachel that his family was about to descend and hope she didn't run screaming. By noon, the house looked like Christmas had exploded in every room. Ellie had hung homemade decorations on every available surface, including several that made no logical sense, like the paper snowflake taped to the bathroom mirror and the construction paper reindeer stuck to the refrigerator with enough magnets to hold up a car. What do you think? Ellie asked, spinning in a circle to showcase her work. Is it good enough? It's perfect, Caleb said honestly. The decorations were lopsided and messy and absolutely perfect because they were Ellie's, because they represented her trying to make their broken little family's Christmas special for people who understood brokenness. Do you think Nina will like the ornament I made for her? Ellie held up a popsicle stick creation covered in so much glitter it was shedding like a dog in summer. She's gonna love it. What about Rachel? Do you think she'll like the picture frame I decorated? Caleb looked at the frame, plastic, dollar store quality, covered in stickers and paint, and the words, Best Rachel Ever, written in Ellie's careful handwriting. It was gaudy and childish, and probably the most beautiful thing anyone would give Rachel this Christmas. She's going to treasure it, Caleb said, his throat tight. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock. Caleb knew without checking that it would be Marie, punctual as always, ready to interrogate Rachel like a detective grilling a suspect. He opened the door to find not just his sister, but also his brother-in-law Tom and their 2 kids. Surprise, Marie said, pushing past him with a casserole dish. We brought dinner contributions. I told you not to come. You suggested I not come. I chose to ignore that suggestion. Marie set the casserole on the counter and turned to face him, her expression softening. How are you doing? Really? I'm okay. Better than I expected. Because of Rachel? Because of a lot of things. But yeah, partly because of Rachel. Marie studied his face with the intensity of someone who'd known him his entire life. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she pulled him into a quick hug. I'm happy for you, little brother. Terrified, but happy. That makes 2 of us. Ellie appeared from her room, now dressed in what she declared was her best Christmas outfit, a red velvet dress that was slightly too small and a headband with reindeer antlers that kept sliding over her eyes. She launched herself at Marie's kids, immediately dragging them off to see her decorations. So when does this mystery woman arrive? Tom asked, helping himself to coffee. Any minute. And please don't interrogate her. Marie's going to be bad enough without you adding to it. I'm not going to interrogate her, Marie protested. I'm going to have a friendly conversation that happens to include very specific questions about her intentions and background. That's literally the definition of interrogation. Before Marie could respond, the doorbell rang again. This time, Caleb knew it would be Rachel. His heart kicked up a notch as he walked to the door, suddenly aware of how much was riding on this afternoon. His family meeting the woman he was starting to care about. 2 teenage girls and an 8-year-old trying to navigate new dynamics. All of it happening on Christmas Eve, a day that should have been sacred to Sarah's memory. He opened the door to find Rachel and Nina standing on his porch, both carrying bags and wearing expressions that suggested they were equally nervous. Rachel had dressed in dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. Nina wore all black, typical teenager, but she was smiling, which seemed like a good sign. "Hi," Rachel said. "We brought cookies and pie and way too much food because Nina stress bakes when she's nervous."
I'm not nervous, Nina protested. You made 3 pies. I like pie. Caleb stepped aside to let them in, catching Rachel's hand for just a second as she passed. Fair warning, my sister showed up uninvited and she's probably going to ask you invasive questions.
How invasive are we talking? Criminal background check level.
Good thing I don't have a criminal background.
That you know of, Nina muttered, earning an elbow from Rachel. They barely made it 3 steps into the house before Ellie appeared, moving at roughly the speed of sound. She crashed into Rachel with enough force to make them both stumble, chattering at a rate that made comprehension impossible.
You're here. You're actually here.
I made decorations and we have pancake stuff ready, and I have presents for both of you. And my Aunt Marie is here, but don't worry, she's nice, even though Daddy said she might interrogate you, which I think means ask lots of questions. And, Ellie, breathe, Caleb interrupted gently. Ellie sucked in a dramatic breath, then grabbed Rachel's hand and Nina's hand and started dragging them toward the kitchen. Come meet everyone! The introductions happened in a blur. Marie descended on Rachel with the subtlety of a freight train, firing questions while pretending to be casual. Tom made small talk with Nina about school and basketball and whether she had a boyfriend, which made Nina's smile turn brittle. Ellie showed off every decoration twice, while Marie's kids watched with the bored tolerance of children forced to interact with adults. Through it all, Rachel handled herself with a grace that impressed Caleb. She answered Marie's questions honestly, complimented Ellie's decorations with genuine enthusiasm, and even got Nina to laugh at something Tom said. She fit into the chaos like she'd always been there, filling a space Caleb hadn't realized was empty. Okay, I approve, Marie whispered to Caleb while Rachel was distracted helping Ellie hang another ornament. She's good people. That's it? No more interrogation? I reserve the right to ask follow-up questions later, but for now, yes. She's good for you. I can see it in your face. What do you see? You're smiling, actually smiling, not that fake thing you've been doing for 4 years. It's nice to see my brother again. The afternoon dissolved into the comfortable chaos of family. They made the promised snowman pancakes, which turned into a competition to see who could create the most ridiculous design. Nina won with a snowman that looked suspiciously like it was giving everyone the middle finger, though she claimed it was just artistic interpretation. They decorated cookies, most of which were consumed before they could be properly iced. They watched Ellie open the presents she'd made for Rachel and Nina, both of whom reacted with exactly the right amount of enthusiasm to make Ellie glow with pride. Rachel kept the glitter-covered picture frame in her lap, running her fingers over Ellie's careful lettering like it was made of gold. By evening, Marie and her family had gone home, leaving just the 4 of them, Caleb, Ellie, Rachel, and Nina. They sprawled in the living room full of cookies and contentment, watching a movie Ellie had selected that was definitely too young for Nina, but which the teenager watched anyway without complaint. Caleb found himself on the couch next to Rachel, their shoulders touching, her presence both familiar and exciting in ways he couldn't quite articulate. Ellie had curled up on Rachel's other side, fighting sleep and losing badly. Nina sat on the floor with her phone, texting someone but still paying attention to the movie. This was what family felt like. Not perfect, not polished, but real and warm and full of the kind of love that grew in the spaces between words. Caleb let himself sink into it, into the possibility that maybe this could be his future, these people, this feeling, this chance at something he'd thought was gone forever. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Severe weather alert. Major snowstorm expected tomorrow, December 25th. Travel not advised. Mountain roads will be particularly dangerous. Caleb frowned at the message, then checked the weather app. Sure enough, a massive storm system was moving in, predicted to dump several feet of snow across the region. The kind of storm that shut down towns and made roads impassable. Everything okay? Rachel asked quietly, noticing his expression. Weather alert. Big storm coming tomorrow. Mountain roads are going to be bad. Rachel tensed. How bad? Bad enough that they're advising people not to travel. He felt her sharp intake of breath, felt the way her whole body went rigid. When he looked at her face, he saw something that looked like fear. Rachel? I should get Nina home, she said abruptly, already moving to stand. Before the storm hits. It's not supposed to start until tomorrow morning. You're fine. Still, we should go. Nina has things to do and we just need to go. Caleb caught her hand, keeping her from bolting. What's wrong? Talk to me. Rachel's eyes darted to Nina, who was still absorbed in her phone, then back to Caleb. Can we talk outside for a minute? They stepped onto the porch, leaving Nina and Ellie inside. The temperature had dropped significantly, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Rachel wrapped her arms around herself, but Caleb suspected the shaking wasn't entirely from cold. I can't drive in snow, Rachel said quietly. Not heavy snow. Not after... She stopped, closing her eyes. My mom died in a car accident during a snowstorm. She was driving to pick up Nina from a friend's house, and the roads were icy, and she lost control. Went off the road, down an embankment. They said she died instantly, but I don't know if that's true or if they just tell people that to make it easier. Caleb felt his chest constrict. I'm sorry. I didn't know. How could you? We haven't exactly had time to share all our trauma. Rachel laughed, but it was brittle. The thing is, I haven't driven in real snow since then. I can handle light flurries, but a storm like what they're predicting, I can't. I physically can't make myself do it. Then don't. Stay here tonight, both of you. Rachel's head snapped up. What? Stay here. The storm's not starting until morning. You'll be safe here, and tomorrow when the roads are clear, you can go home. Caleb, we couldn't impose like that. It's not an imposition. I have a guest room. Ellie would be thrilled, and honestly, he stepped closer, taking her cold hands in his. I'd feel better knowing you're here and safe rather than out there trying to drive through your worst fear. Rachel stared at him, conflict clear in her expression. This is moving fast. I know. Your daughter barely knows me. Nina barely knows you. Having a sleepover it's a lot. Everything about this has been a lot. Might as well keep the trend going. Despite her obvious anxiety, Rachel smiled. You make a compelling argument. Is that a yes? Let me ask Nina. If she's okay with it, then yes. Nina, as it turned out, was more than okay with it. In fact, she looked relieved when Rachel explained the situation, which told Caleb that she'd inherited her sister's fear of snow driving, even if she didn't want to admit it. Ellie's reaction was predictable. She screamed loud enough to break glass, then immediately started planning activities for an impromptu Christmas Eve sleepover. Within minutes, she'd dragged Nina off to her room to show her everything important, leaving Caleb and Rachel alone in the living room. Thank you for this, Rachel said. I know it's weird and sudden, and it's fine, more than fine. Caleb settled back onto the couch, and Rachel joined him, sitting close enough that their thighs touched. Besides, this way I get to have Christmas morning with people who understand why it's hard. Is that what we are now? People who understand each other's hard days? Among other things, yeah. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to Ellie's excited chatter drifting from her bedroom. Outside, the first snowflakes had started to fall, just a few scouts from the storm that would arrive with dawn. Caleb watched them drift past the window, thinking about Sarah and storms, and the strange way grief could transform into something else when you found someone who'd walked through similar weather. Can I tell you something? Rachel said softly. Of course. I'm terrified. Of this, of us, of how fast everything is moving. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong, because that's what always happens. Good things don't last in my experience. Mine either. So what do we do? Just wait for it to fall apart? Caleb thought about that. About Sarah and car accidents and hearts that stopped beating. About all the ways life could destroy you without warning. About the choice to try anyway, to reach for happiness even knowing it could be snatched away. We show up, he said finally. Every day we just show up. And when the bad things come, because they will come, we'll face them together instead of alone. That's all we can do. Rachel leaned her head against his shoulder, and Caleb wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. They stayed like that while snow fell and children laughed and the clock ticked toward Christmas morning. It wasn't the Christmas either of them had planned. It wasn't the Christmas their lost loved ones would have given them. But it was theirs. Messy and complicated and full of fear and hope in equal measure. And maybe that was enough. The evening wore on. They ordered pizza because no one felt like cooking. They played board games that Ellie changed the rules for halfway through. They built a blanket fort in the living room that Nina pretended was beneath her dignity while helping make it structurally sound. They laughed until their sides hurt and told stories that made them cry and existed in that strange space between grief and joy where healing happened. By 10 o'clock, both girls had crashed. Ellie fell asleep in the blanket fort, still wearing her reindeer antlers. Nina lasted another 30 minutes before curling up on the couch, her phone still clutched in her hand. Caleb covered them both with blankets, watching them sleep with an ache in his chest that felt different from the usual grief. This ache was softer, warmer. This ache came from caring about people who were alive and present and still capable of being lost. We should probably sleep too, Rachel whispered, but neither of them moved. They ended up sitting on the floor next to the Christmas tree, a scraggly thing Caleb and Ellie had picked out at the lot, decorated with years of homemade ornaments that chronicled Ellie's childhood. Colored lights blinked in patterns, casting rainbow shadows across Rachel's face. I haven't had a Christmas like this since Mom died, Rachel admitted. Nina and I usually just order Chinese food and watch movies and pretend we're not counting down the hours until it's over. Same here, except we make pancakes and burn cookies and put on a good show for my sister. But inside we're both just surviving until December 26th. What changed this year? Caleb looked at her, really looked at her. At the woman who'd walked 6 miles through a blizzard because she kept her promises, who'd shown up to a school pageant on his worst day because she understood what it meant to carry grief during the holidays, who was here now in his living room on Christmas Eve, making his daughter laugh and his house feel like a home again. You changed, he said simply. You and Nina walked into our lives and made everything feel possible again. Rachel's eyes glistened in the Christmas lights. You did the same for us. Nina hasn't smiled this much since before Mom died. And me, I forgot what it felt like to look forward to something instead of just dreading it. They kissed then, soft and tentative, tasting of possibility and fear and the courage it took to try again. When they pulled apart, Rachel was smiling, and Caleb felt something in his chest click into place. Merry Christmas, Caleb. Merry Christmas, Rachel. They stayed up talking until well past midnight, sharing stories about the people they'd lost and the people they were trying to become, about Nina's college applications and Ellie's dreams of saving every animal on Earth, about carpentry and nursing and all the ways they built things, furniture, health, lives, from broken pieces. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them. Caleb showed Rachel to the guest room, which was really just his office, with a pull-out couch, and made sure she had everything she needed. They stood in the doorway for a long moment, neither wanting to say goodnight, both knowing they should. Thank you for staying, Caleb said. Thank you for asking us to. Tomorrow's going to be chaos. Fair warning. I wouldn't want it any other way. One more kiss, brief and sweet, and then Rachel closed the door. Caleb stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the sound of his house full of people. 2 sleeping children in his living room. A woman in his guest room who made him believe in futures instead of just pasts. A storm gathering outside that would trap them all here together for Christmas morning. He should have been terrified, should have been panicking about boundaries and appropriate timelines and all the ways this could go wrong. Instead, he went to his bedroom, set his alarm, and fell asleep with a smile on his face for the first time on Christmas Eve in 4 years. He woke to screaming. Caleb bolted upright, heart hammering, instantly in that space between sleep and panic where everything felt like an emergency. It took him 3 seconds to recognize Ellie's voice. Not scared, not hurt, but excited. So excited she was shrieking like someone had told her Santa was real and currently landing on their roof. "It's snowing! It's really snowing! Everyone wake up! You have to see this!" Caleb grabbed his phone, 6:15 in the morning, way too early for this level of enthusiasm, and stumbled out of his room. The living room was already full of people in various states of consciousness. Nina sat up in the blanket fort, her hair sticking up in every direction, looking deeply annoyed at being awake. Rachel emerged from the guest room in pajama pants and one of Caleb's old t-shirts she must have borrowed, her eyes still half closed. Ellie stood at the window, practically vibrating with excitement. "Look! Look how much snow there is!" Caleb joined her at the window and felt his stomach drop. The weather alert hadn't been exaggerating. Snow covered everything, cars, trees, the entire street, in what looked like at least 2 feet of powder, with more falling so heavily he could barely see across the road. The world had transformed overnight into a winter wonderland that would have been beautiful if it wasn't so clearly dangerous. "That's a lot of snow," Nina observed, now standing beside them. "Like, a lot. The roads are going to be impassable," Rachel said quietly. She'd gone pale, her hands trembling slightly as she stared at the white landscape. We won't be able to leave." "You weren't planning to leave until later anyway," Caleb reminded her gently, "and the plows will get to the main roads eventually." "But what if they don't? What if we're stuck here for days?" "Then you're stuck here for days. We have food, we have power, we have everything we need. It'll be fine." Rachel didn't look convinced, but Ellie's enthusiasm was hard to resist. "Can we build a snowman, please? And have hot chocolate? And make snow angels?" "After breakfast," Caleb said, "and after I check to make sure the driveway isn't completely buried." The driveway was, in fact, completely buried. Caleb spent an hour digging out enough space to at least access his truck, though he had no illusions about actually driving anywhere. The snow kept falling, relentless and beautiful, trapping them all together in a way that should have felt suffocating but instead felt almost intentional. They made breakfast together, pancakes again, because Ellie insisted it was tradition. Rachel proved surprisingly competent in the kitchen, working alongside Caleb with an ease that suggested they'd been doing this for years instead of days. Nina set the table and poured orange juice and only complained minimally about being awake before noon. "This is nice," Ellie announced through a mouthful of pancake. "We should do this every Christmas." "We literally just met them, Bug," Caleb reminded her. "So? That doesn't mean we can't make it a tradition." Nina snorted. "She's got a point. Besides, this is way better than what Rachel and I usually do." "What do you usually do?" Ellie asked. "Order Chinese food, watch movies, pretend we're fine." "That sounds sad." "It is sad," Nina agreed, meeting Rachel's eyes across the table. There was something in that look, an acknowledgement maybe, or permission. Permission to admit that their Christmases had been hollow performances, that they'd both been drowning in grief while pretending to swim. "Well, you're here now," Ellie declared with the absolute certainty of a child who believed she could fix anything with enough determination. "And we're going to have the best Christmas ever." After breakfast, they bundled up and ventured into the snow. Ellie and Nina built a snowman that looked more like a snow monster, complete with stick arms positioned in threatening poses. Caleb and Rachel worked on clearing more of the driveway, though both knew it was futile with the snow still falling. "How are you doing?" Caleb asked during a break, leaning on his shovel. "With all of this?" Rachel looked around at the snow-covered world, then at Nina and Ellie laughing as they added features to their creation. "Better than I expected. Being trapped here should terrify me, but it doesn't. It feels safe somehow. Like the storm is giving us permission to just stop and be together without worrying about what comes next." "I like that interpretation." "Yeah?" "Yeah." They went back inside when Ellie started complaining about frozen fingers. Hot chocolate was consumed in quantities that definitely weren't healthy. They opened presents, Small things Caleb and Ellie had prepared for each other, gifts that Rachel and Nina had brought despite claiming they didn't celebrate much anymore. Ellie cried happy tears over the art supplies Nina gave her. Nina actually hugged Rachel when she opened the leather journal her sister had picked out. Caleb accepted the scarf Rachel offered with hands that shook slightly, because it meant she'd been thinking about him, planning for him, before they'd even had their disastrous first date. The day passed in a blur of laughter and warmth and moments that felt suspended outside of normal time. They played games and told stories and made dinner together, a chaotic affair that somehow resulted in edible food. The snow kept falling, building walls around them, keeping the world at bay. By evening, they were all exhausted in the best way. Nina and Ellie had retreated to Ellie's room for what Ellie described as girl talk, leaving Caleb and Rachel alone in the living room. The Christmas tree lights blinked their steady rhythm, and outside the wind howled, pushing snow against the windows. "Best Christmas I've had in years," Rachel said softly, curled up next to Caleb on the couch. "Same. Think the girls are plotting something?" "Absolutely. The question is what?" As if summoned by their speculation, both girls appeared in the doorway wearing expressions that confirmed they were definitely up to something. "We have an announcement," Ellie said solemnly. "Oh no," Caleb muttered. "Nina and I have decided that you two are going to keep dating, officially. No backing out." "That's not really how dating works, Bug." "It is now. We took a vote." "There are only two of you," Rachel pointed out. "Unanimous is unanimous," Nina said with a shrug. "Besides, you're both obviously into each other. You might as well make it official." Caleb looked at Rachel. Rachel looked at Caleb. They both looked at the two girls standing in the doorway, arms crossed, wearing identical expressions of determination. "They're not wrong," Rachel said finally. "About which part?" "The being obviously into each other part." She turned to face him more fully. "I like you, Caleb Turner. Like, really like you. Enough that being snowed in at your house feels better than being anywhere else. Enough that I want to see where this goes, even though it scares me." "I like you too," Caleb said. "Enough that having you here feels right. Enough that I want you to keep showing up, storms and fears and all." "Gross," Nina said, but she was smiling. "So it's official?" Ellie pressed. "You're boyfriend and girlfriend?" "We're adults, Bug. We don't use those terms." "Fine. You're partners. Dating exclusively, whatever grown-ups call it." Ellie bounced on her toes. "But you are together, right?" Caleb looked at Rachel, finding his answer in her eyes before either of them spoke. "Yeah," he said. "We're together." Ellie's cheer probably violated several noise ordinances. Nina pumped her fist in victory, and Caleb pulled Rachel closer, feeling her warmth against his side, feeling like maybe, just maybe, the storm had brought them exactly where they needed to be. Outside, snow continued to fall, remaking the world in white. Inside, 4 people who'd been broken by loss found themselves being remade by connection. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what any of them had planned. But it was real. And sometimes, real was better than perfect. Sometimes, real was everything. The snow stopped falling 3 days later, leaving behind a world transformed and roads that would take weeks to fully clear. Rachel and Nina had stayed the entire time, their temporary visit becoming an extended sleepover that blurred the lines between guest and family. By the time the main roads reopened, Ellie had declared Nina her honorary big sister, and Caleb had gotten used to waking up to the sound of Rachel making coffee in his kitchen. Saying goodbye felt wrong. They stood in the driveway on a bright January morning, the sun glinting off snow that still covered everything in crystalline white. Rachel's car had been towed from Route 12 weeks ago and was finally repaired, sitting in Caleb's driveway like an unwelcome reminder that the storm-imposed togetherness had to end. "I don't want you to go," Ellie said, clinging to Nina's waist. "Can't you just live here forever?" "I have school, kid," Nina said, but her voice was gentle. "And your dad's house is way too small for all of us." "We could make it work." "Ellie," Caleb said softly, "let them go home. We'll see them again soon." "Promise?" Ellie turned to Rachel, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You promise you'll come back?" Rachel crouched down to Ellie's level, taking her small hands in both of hers. "I promise. Wild horses couldn't keep me away from you." "What about regular horses?"
Those either. They drove away with Ellie waving from the porch until the car disappeared around the corner. Caleb stood beside his daughter, his arm around her shoulders, feeling the absence like a physical ache. 3 days shouldn't have been enough to make someone essential, but somehow Rachel and Nina had become woven into the fabric of their days. The house felt too quiet without Nina's sarcastic commentary and Rachel's laughter. "I miss them already," Ellie whispered. "Me too, Bug." "Are you going to marry her?" The question caught Caleb off guard.
It's way too early to think about that. But you could. Someday. If things keep going good. Caleb pulled her closer. Maybe. Someday. If things keep going good. Things did keep going good, though not without complications. Rachel and Caleb fell into a rhythm of seeing each other whenever their schedules allowed. Dinners after Ellie's bedtime, coffee dates during Rachel's rare mornings off, stolen moments between the chaos of single parenting and demanding careers. Nina and Ellie video chatted almost daily, their friendship deepening in ways that made both Caleb and Rachel simultaneously proud and terrified about teenage influence on an 8-year-old. January melted into February. Rachel started keeping a toothbrush at Caleb's house. Caleb learned the code to Rachel's apartment. They navigated the awkwardness of introducing each other to friends and the tension of blending their separate lives into something that resembled a relationship. It wasn't always easy. Rachel worked brutal shifts at the hospital that left her exhausted and emotionally drained. Caleb had deadlines and client meetings and a daughter who needed help with homework and someone to attend her soccer games. They fought about small things, whose turn it was to cancel plans, whether it was too soon to have sleepovers when Ellie was home, how to balance their need for each other with their responsibilities to the kids depending on them. But they showed up, even when it was hard, even when it would have been easier to retreat into their separate lives and admit that maybe they'd moved too fast. They showed up and worked through it and learned that love the second time around looked different than the first. It was messier, more complicated, built on the foundation of loss that made every good moment feel both precious and precarious. The call came in early March, on a Tuesday afternoon when Caleb was in his workshop sanding down a table he'd promised to deliver by Friday. His phone buzzed and he almost ignored it, covered in sawdust, hands full of sandpaper, mind focused on getting the grain just right. But something made him check the screen. Rachel's name. She never called during her shifts unless it was an emergency. "Rachel, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Something's right. Something's really, really right." Her voice was breathless, excited in a way he'd never heard before. "Can you meet me, like, now? I know it's the middle of the day, but this can't wait." "Are you okay? Is Nina okay?" "We're fine. Better than fine, just, can you meet me at Henderson's, where we had our first date?" Caleb looked at the half-finished table, the pile of work waiting for him, the mental list of everything he needed to accomplish before Ellie got home from school. "Give me 20 minutes. He made it in 15, driving too fast through streets still lined with melting snow. Rachel's car was already in the parking lot and she was pacing outside the restaurant's entrance, her nurse's scrubs visible under her winter coat. When she saw him, her face lit up with a smile that made his chest ache. "What's going on?" Caleb asked, pulling her into his arms. "You're freaking me out a little." "Sorry, I know I'm being cryptic, but I had to tell you in person." Rachel pulled back, her hands gripping his forearms, her eyes bright. "Nina got a full scholarship, full ride to Montana State. Everything covered, tuition, room and board, books, everything." The words took a moment to sink in. "Rachel, that's incredible. When did she find out?" "Today. The letter came this morning. She called me at work, crying, and I've been a mess ever since." Rachel laughed, wiping at her eyes. "She did it, Caleb. She actually did it. She's going to college, and I don't have to figure out how to pay for it, and she has a future. And—" Caleb kissed her, cutting off the stream of words, tasting salt from her happy tears. When they pulled apart, Rachel was crying harder, but she was smiling too. "I'm so happy for her," Caleb said. "For both of you. She deserves this." "She does. She's worked so hard, and I'm so proud I could burst." Rachel's smile faltered slightly. "But that's not the only thing I needed to tell you." Something in her tone made Caleb's stomach tighten. "Okay. I got a job offer, a really good job offer. Head of emergency nursing at a hospital in Seattle. More money, better hours, a chance to actually have a life outside of work. Rachel's hands were shaking in his. They want me to start in June. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Seattle. That was over 600 miles away. That was a different state, a different life, the end of everything they'd been building. Seattle, Caleb repeated numbly. I know, it's far. It's really far, and I haven't said yes. I wanted to talk to you first, but Rachel stopped, taking a shaky breath. Nina's scholarship means she'll be okay financially. This job means I can give her everything else she needs. Help with a car, money for the things scholarship doesn't cover, a safety net. It's the security we've never had. You should take it, Caleb heard himself say. What? You should take it. It's an incredible opportunity. Nina needs you to be stable, and this job gives you that. Rachel stared at him, her expression crumbling. Just like that? You're okay with me leaving? I'm not okay with it at all. It's killing me. But I'm not going to be the reason you don't give Nina everything she deserves. Caleb forced himself to keep talking, even though every word felt like swallowing glass. You've sacrificed everything for her. If this job means you can finally breathe, you have to take it. And us? What happens to us? I don't know. Long distance? Or maybe... He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Maybe nothing. Maybe this was how it ended. Maybe 3 months of happiness was all they got before life ripped them apart again. Rachel pulled away from him, wrapping her arms around herself. I can't do long distance. I tried that after Mom died with a guy I was seeing, and it destroyed us both. The distance, the resentment, the constant missing each other, I can't go through that again. Then we'll figure something else out. What else is there, Caleb? You can't leave. You have Ellie and your business and your whole life here. And I can't stay because I need this job, need the security it provides. There's no compromise that doesn't require one of us to sacrifice everything. She was right, and they both knew it. They stood in the parking lot where everything had started, surrounded by the remnants of winter, facing the reality that sometimes love wasn't enough. Sometimes life intervened with opportunities and responsibilities that pulled people in different directions, no matter how much they wanted to stay together. When do you need to decide? Caleb asked. They want an answer by the end of the month. 3 weeks. They had 3 weeks to figure out if there was any way to make this work or if they needed to start saying goodbye. The drive home was a blur. Caleb picked up Ellie from school on autopilot, barely hearing her chatter about her day. He made dinner without tasting it. He helped with homework while his mind churned through impossible scenarios. When Marie called to check in, he told her everything was fine because he didn't have the energy to explain that his relationship was imploding. That night, after Ellie was in bed, Caleb sat in his workshop and tried to work. But his hands were shaking too badly to hold the tools safely, and his vision kept blurring with tears he refused to shed. He'd known this was coming. Some part of him had known from the beginning that happiness this good couldn't last, that the universe would find a way to take it away like it took everything else. His phone buzzed, a text from Rachel. I'm sorry for dropping this on you like that, for not knowing what to do, for everything. Caleb stared at the message, then typed back, Nothing to be sorry for. You're doing what's best for Nina. That's what matters. What about what's best for us? I don't think there is a best for us option here. Her response took several minutes. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose you either. But I don't know how to fix this. Neither did she, apparently, because she didn't respond. Caleb sat in his workshop until well past midnight, surrounded by half-finished furniture and the sawdust-scented ghost of the life he'd been building. Tomorrow, he'd have to tell Ellie. Tomorrow, he'd have to explain that Rachel might be leaving, that sometimes people you love have to make impossible choices, that life keeps moving forward even when you desperately want it to stop. But tonight, he just sat in the dark and let himself feel the loss before it even happened. The next 3 weeks were agony. Rachel and Caleb saw each other less, both of them pulling back to protect themselves from the inevitable goodbye. Nina and Ellie noticed the change, but didn't understand it, couldn't understand it, because neither Caleb nor Rachel had the heart to tell them what was coming. Caleb threw himself into work, taking on more projects than he could handle, staying in his workshop until exhaustion forced him to sleep. Rachel picked up extra shifts at the hospital, coming home too tired to think about Seattle, or sacrifice, or the man she was preparing to leave behind. They were managing the ending before it even arrived, and it was destroying them both. On March 20th, 10 days before Rachel's decision deadline, Caleb's phone rang at 2 in the morning. He jerked awake, heart pounding, instantly alert with the kind of adrenaline that came from years of single parenting and middle-of-the-night emergencies. Rachel's name on the screen. "Rachel? What's wrong?" "It's Nina." Her voice was shaking, breaking. "There was an accident, a bus accident on the mountain route coming back from a field trip. They airlifted her to regional medical. She's alive but hurt, and I can't drive, Caleb. I can't make myself drive up that mountain in the dark, and I need to get to her and I can't. I'm coming, right now. Stay where you are." Caleb was out of bed and moving before he'd fully processed the words. He called Marie, got her to come stay with Ellie, threw on clothes, and grabbed his keys. The drive to Rachel's apartment took 8 minutes that felt like 8 hours. She was waiting outside, still in her scrubs, shaking so hard she could barely stand. "Get in," Caleb said, and she collapsed into the passenger seat, her breath coming in gasps that might have been sobs or might have been panic attacks or both. The drive up the mountain was treacherous. The road was dark and winding, with patches of ice still lurking in shaded areas despite the calendar claiming spring had arrived. Caleb drove with white knuckles and complete focus, acutely aware of Rachel beside him reliving her worst nightmare. Her mother had died on a road like this. Now her sister was hurt on a road like this. And Rachel was trapped in a car, forced to face the fear that had paralyzed her for 2 years. "Talk to me," Caleb said. "Tell me about Nina. Tell me anything." Rachel's breath hitched. She was at a science symposium, regional competition. She was so excited, spent weeks preparing her presentation on environmental engineering. She texted me this afternoon with pictures, said she thought she might place in the top 3. "She's brilliant. She probably won first place." "She better have. I'll kill her if she went through all this for second place." The joke was weak, but it was there. Caleb reached over and took Rachel's hand, feeling her grip his fingers hard enough to hurt. "She's going to be okay," Caleb said, not knowing if it was true but needing to say it anyway. "You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise you're not alone. Whatever happens, you're not facing it alone." They made it to the hospital in 40 minutes. Rachel was out of the truck before Caleb had fully stopped, running through the emergency entrance with Caleb close behind. The nurses recognized her immediately. She worked here, knew these people, had probably saved half their lives at some point. They rushed her to Nina's room while Caleb waited in a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and fear. It felt like hours before Rachel emerged, her face streaked with tears, but her expression holding something that might have been relief. "She's okay. Broken arm, concussion, lots of bruises, but okay. She's awake and asking for her phone because apparently surviving a bus crash doesn't mean you stop texting your boyfriend." Rachel laughed, but it came out more like a sob. "She's okay, Caleb. She's really okay." Caleb pulled her into his arms and held her while she fell apart, her body shaking with the release of terror and relief. Around them, the hospital moved with its constant rhythm. Doctors rushing to emergencies, families waiting for news, life and death dancing their eternal partnership in fluorescent-lit hallways. "Can I see her?" Caleb asked when Rachel had calmed enough to breathe normally. "She's asking for you, says she needs to tell you something important." Nina looked small in the hospital bed, her arm in a cast and a bandage wrapped around her head. But her eyes were alert, and she managed a weak smile when Caleb entered. "Hey, kid," Caleb said, pulling up a chair beside the bed. "You trying to give your sister a heart attack?" "Not intentionally, though the drama is kind of fun." Nina's smile faded. "Is Rachel okay? She looked pretty freaked out." "She drove up the mountain to get to you. First time since your mom died that she's been in a car on mountain roads." Nina's eyes widened. "She drove? But she can't. She didn't. I did. But she was in the car, facing her worst fear because you needed her." Caleb paused. "That's what love looks like, Nina. Showing up even when you're terrified. Like you did. Like I did." Nina was quiet for a moment, picking at the edge of her blanket. "Rachel told me about the job offer, about Seattle. She said she hasn't decided yet." "That's between you and your sister." "Except it's not, is it? Because her decision affects you and Ellie, too. Nina met his eyes, and despite the bandages and the hospital gown, she looked far older than 15. I don't want her to take the job. Nina, I know what you're going to say, that it's a great opportunity, that she deserves it, that she needs the security. But here's the thing, Rachel doesn't need more money. She needs to be happy, and she's happy here, with you, in a way she hasn't been since Mom died. What about your scholarship? What about my scholarship covers everything, literally everything. Rachel keeps acting like she needs to support me, but I don't need her money anymore. I just need her, and she needs you. Caleb felt his throat tighten. It's not that simple. Why not? She loves you. You love her. Nina and I love each other like siblings. We're good together. Why does it have to be more complicated than that? Because adults have responsibilities and careers, and they also have the right to be happy. Rachel's spent 2 years sacrificing everything for me. Don't let her sacrifice you too. Fight for her. The words hit Caleb square in the chest. Fight for her. When had he stopped fighting? When had he decided that Rachel's happiness meant letting her go instead of giving her reasons to stay? I'll think about it, Caleb said quietly. Think fast. She has to decide in 10 days. Caleb sat with Nina until she fell asleep, her good hand curled around his like Ellie used to do when she was small and afraid of nightmares. Then he found Rachel in the hallway, talking quietly with one of the doctors about Nina's care plan. Can we talk? Caleb asked when the doctor left. They found an empty waiting room, the kind with outdated magazines and chairs that were designed to be uncomfortable enough to discourage long stays. Rachel sank into one, exhaustion written in every line of her body. I can't believe I did it, she said. Drove up that mountain. I was so sure I couldn't, but then you were there and Nina needed me, and somehow my body just worked. That's what you do. You show up when people need you, even when you're terrified. I wanted to run. Every mile of that drive I wanted to make you turn around. But you didn't. But I didn't. Rachel looked at him, her dark eyes full of exhaustion and something else, something that looked like realization. I couldn't have done it without you, without knowing you were there, that I wasn't alone. That's what you've given me these past months, the ability to face things I thought would destroy me. You've given me the same thing. Have I? Or have I just complicated your life and brought chaos to your peaceful existence? Caleb laughed despite everything. Rachel, my existence was never peaceful. It was hollow. I was going through the motions, pretending to be okay for Ellie's sake. You didn't complicate my life. You gave it back to me. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. Then what do we do? About Seattle, about this impossible choice, about everything. I don't know yet, but I know we don't give up. We've both spent too long being afraid of losing people to let fear make this decision for us. They sat in the waiting room as dawn broke outside, holding hands and talking through possibilities that all seemed impossible, but maybe, just maybe, weren't. They talked about careers and kids and the difference between sacrifice and compromise. They talked about what mattered and what didn't, about the life they'd stumbled into building and whether it was worth fighting for. And slowly, as the sun rose over the mountains that had nearly killed Nina and had killed Rachel's mother and represented every fear they both carried, a plan began to form. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't simple. But it might just work. 3 days later, Caleb walked into his sister's house with a proposal that made Marie stare at him like he'd grown a second head. You want to what? She asked. Expand. Bring on a partner. Maybe 2. People who can handle the day-to-day work while I focus on design and custom pieces. It would mean I'm not tied to the workshop all day every day. It would mean I could actually have flexibility in my schedule. Marie studied his face. This is about Rachel. This is about building a business that can grow without me being present every second, something sustainable, something that gives me room to have a life outside of work. And if she takes the Seattle job anyway, then I'll have a business that runs better and I'll have tried. But Marie, I love her. I really love her, and I'm tired of letting fear decide my future. His sister's expression softened. About damn time, little brother. Caleb spent the next week making calls, reaching out to other carpenters he'd worked with over the years, people he trusted who might be interested in a partnership. The response was better than he'd hoped. By March 28th, 2 days before Rachel's deadline, He had 2 solid partners lined up and a business plan that would allow him to step back from the daily grind without abandoning his company. That same week, Rachel made calls of her own. To the hospital in Seattle, negotiating terms. To regional medical, exploring options. To nursing schools and professional contacts and anyone who might help her find a third path between the 2 impossibilities. On March 30th, the day Rachel needed to give her answer to Seattle, Caleb asked her to meet him at Henderson's Steakhouse, the same place everything had started 4 months ago when she'd walked through a storm because she kept her promises. She arrived looking nervous, beautiful in jeans and a blue sweater that brought out flecks of color in her eyes. Caleb stood when she approached, and they hugged like they hadn't seen each other in weeks instead of yesterday at the hospital visiting Nina. "So?" Caleb asked when they were seated. "What did you decide?" Rachel took a deep breath. "I turned down Seattle." Caleb's heart leaped. "You did?" "I did. But I also got a different offer. Head of ER nursing here at Regional Medical. Less money than Seattle, but better hours, more control over my schedule, and the chance to actually build something instead of just taking over someone else's program." Rachel's hands were shaking. "And I can do it while staying here. With Nina. With you." "Rachel, that's incredible. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I needed to know I was making the decision for me, not just for you. I needed to know I could stand on my own before I decided to stand with you." She paused. "What about you? Your business?" Caleb told her about the partnerships, about the plan to expand and delegate, about creating space in his life for more than just work and parenting. Rachel listened with growing wonder, tears streaming down her face. "We're really doing this?" she whispered. "We're both choosing this?" "We're both choosing this." They kissed across the table, not caring that the same waitress who'd served them on their disastrous first date was watching with a huge grin. When they pulled apart, both of them were crying and laughing in equal measure. "I have something else to tell you," Rachel said. "Nina wants to live in the dorms when she starts at Montana State. She says she needs the independence, needs to figure out who she is outside of being my responsibility, which means I'll be living alone for the first time in 2 years. That must be terrifying." "It is. But it also means I have room for other people in my life, if they wanted to be in my life. More permanently." Caleb understood what she was asking. It was too soon by any conventional timeline. They'd only been together for 4 months, but they'd also walked through hell together, faced their worst fears together, and chosen each other when logic said they should walk away. "I think," Caleb said carefully, "that we should take this slow. Let Nina get settled at school. Let us both adjust to our new work situations, and then, maybe after a year or so, we can talk about what permanent looks like." Rachel smiled. "That's very reasonable and mature of you." "I have my moments." "I hate reasonable and mature." "Me too." They grinned at each other like idiots, high on possibility and the reckless courage it took to reach for happiness when you'd learned how easily it could be lost. The seasons turned. Spring became summer, became fall. Nina started at Montana State and thrived, calling Rachel less frequently but with more substance when she did. Ellie adjusted to 4th grade and decided she wanted to be a doctor instead of a veterinarian, then changed her mind back a week later. Caleb's business grew with his new partners handling more of the day-to-day work. Rachel transformed the ER at Regional Medical into something that made her excited to go to work instead of dreading each shift. And slowly, carefully, Rachel and Caleb built a life together. Not the life either of them had planned, not the life they'd had with the people they'd lost, but a new life, constructed from broken pieces and hard-won hope and the understanding that showing up mattered more than being perfect. They had their first real fight in July about whose turn it was to host Sunday dinner. They had their first major scare in August when Ellie fell off her bike and needed stitches. They had their first "I love you" in September, whispered in Caleb's workshop while rain pounded the roof and sawdust floated through lamplight like golden snow. December came again, bringing with it all the weight of anniversaries and loss. But this time, they faced it together. Rachel and Nina spent December 18th at the cemetery where their mother was buried, and Caleb and Ellie joined them, standing witness to grief while offering the comfort of presence. On December 22nd, all 4 of them went to Sarah's grave, bringing flowers and stories, and the acknowledgement that loving someone new didn't mean forgetting someone lost. Christmas Eve found them at Caleb's house again, exactly 1 year after the storm that had trapped them together. Nina was home from college for winter break, regaling them with stories about her roommate and her classes, and the boy she'd started dating who sounded suspiciously serious. Ellie had grown 3 inches and lost 2 teeth, her gap-toothed grin infectious as she showed Nina her science project about ecosystems. After dinner, after the girls had gone to Ellie's room to do whatever it was that a 9-year-old and a 16-year-old found to talk about, Caleb and Rachel stood on the porch watching snow fall. Light snow, nothing like the blizzard that had changed everything a year ago, but enough to paint the world fresh and new. "I have something for you," Caleb said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Rachel's eyes widened. "Caleb, it's not what you think. Open it." Inside was a key. A simple brass key on a ring with a small tag that read home. "It's to my house," Caleb explained. "I know we talked about waiting, about taking things slow, but it's been a year and I'm tired of you going home to an empty apartment every night. I'm tired of Ellie asking when Rachel's coming back. I'm tired of pretending that you're not already part of this family." He took a shaky breath. "Move in with us. Not because we're rushing, but because you're already here in every way that matters. Make it official." Rachel stared at the key, then at Caleb, then back at the key. "What about Nina?" "Nina has the dorms and will have her own place after that. But she'll always have a home here too. We'll make sure of it." "What about Ellie? Have you asked her?" "It was her idea, actually. She said we were being stupid waiting for some arbitrary timeline when we all knew what we wanted." Rachel laughed, wiping at her eyes. "She's too smart for 9. She's too smart for 30. So what do you say?" Rachel closed the box around the key, then stood on her tiptoes to kiss him. "I say yes. I say I'm tired of waiting too. I say let's stop being reasonable and mature and just be happy." "Yeah?" "Yeah." They kissed in the falling snow, 2 people who'd found each other in a blizzard and decided to weather every storm together. Inside, they could hear Ellie and Nina laughing about something, their voices carrying through the walls of a house that was about to get crowded in the best possible way. "I have something for you too," Rachel said, pulling back. "But it's not a physical thing. It's more of a promise, I guess. I'm listening. I promise to show up. Every day, even when it's hard. Even when I'm scared or tired or convinced I'm going to mess everything up. I promise to keep choosing this, choosing us, choosing the life we're building together." Rachel's voice broke. "And I promise to never ever take for granted the fact that you chose me too. Always," Caleb said. "I will always choose you." They went inside where it was warm, where their girls were waiting, where life continued its messy, beautiful march forward. And Caleb thought about the man he'd been a year ago, sitting in his truck in a parking lot, convinced he was too broken to try again. That man wouldn't recognize his life now, wouldn't believe that happiness could come from disaster, that love could bloom in the middle of grief, that showing up even when you were terrified could lead to everything you'd been afraid to hope for. The next morning, Christmas Day, Rachel woke up in Caleb's bed for the first time as an official resident rather than a guest. They made snowman pancakes with Ellie and Nina, the kitchen descending into chaos and laughter. They opened presents under the tree, including the one Caleb had hidden in the back, a framed photo of the 4 of them from Thanksgiving, looking like the family they'd accidentally become. "This is perfect," Ellie declared, studying the photo. "We look like we belong together." "That's because we do," Nina said, slinging an arm around Ellie's shoulders. Later, after the wrapping paper had been cleared and the breakfast dishes washed, Caleb found himself standing at his workshop door with Rachel beside him. Inside sat his current project, a dining table large enough to seat 8, built from reclaimed wood that had weathered decades of storms and emerged beautiful in its imperfection. "It's for us," Caleb explained, "for family dinners and homework sessions, and all the life that happens around a table. Big enough for us, for Nina when she visits, for Marie's family, for whoever else becomes part of this." Rachel traced the wood grain with her fingers. "It's beautiful. When will it be done?" "Soon. I want to have it ready for Nina's spring break. Our first official family dinner in our official home." "Our home," Rachel repeated, testing the words. I like the sound of that. The months that followed were full of adjustments and growth. Rachel moved her things into Caleb's house, and they navigated the strange dance of combining lives that had been separate. They fought about closet space and whose turn it was to do dishes and how to discipline Ellie when she pushed boundaries. They made up with conversation and compromise and the understanding that disagreeing didn't mean disaster. Nina came home for spring break in March, and they christened the new dining table with a dinner that included Marie's family, some of Rachel's nursing friends, and enough food to feed a small army. Sitting at the head of the table, watching the people he loved pass plates and share stories and exist together in loud, chaotic harmony, Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Complete. Not because the grief was gone. It would never be fully gone. Sarah would always be part of him, and Rachel's mother would always be part of her. But grief and joy could coexist. Loss and love could share the same space. You could honor the past while building a future. That night, after everyone had gone home and Ellie was asleep and Nina was texting her boyfriend in the guest room, Caleb and Rachel sat on the porch like they had so many times before. A year and a half since their disastrous first date. A year and a half of showing up and choosing each other and building something real from the wreckage of their separate losses. "I have another question for you," Caleb said. Rachel turned to him, eyebrow raised. "Should I be nervous?" "Maybe. Depends on your answer." Caleb took a breath, feeling like he had that first night, terrified and hopeful in equal measure. "Marry me." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a declaration, a promise wrapped in 2 words. Rachel stared at him. "Are you serious?" "Completely. I know it's been less than 2 years. I know we're supposed to wait longer, be more cautious, protect ourselves from more loss. But I'm done waiting. I'm done being cautious. I want to marry you, Rachel Monroe. I want to make this official in every possible way. I want Nina to be Ellie's real sister, not just her honorary one. I want to wake up every day for the rest of my life knowing that you chose me and I chose you and we're in this together, whatever comes." "You don't have a ring," Rachel said, but she was crying now, happy tears that caught the porch light. "I have a ring. It's in my workshop, hidden in a drawer because I've been carrying it around for 3 months waiting for the perfect moment. But I realized tonight that there's no such thing as a perfect moment. There's just this moment, right now with you." "Yes," Rachel whispered. "Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it. Yes to family and chaos and building a life together. Yes to choosing each other every day. Yes to everything." Caleb pulled her into his arms and held her while the night settled around them, full of stars and possibility, and the future they were brave enough to reach for. They were married in December, on what would have been the 6th anniversary of Sarah's death. It felt right somehow, transforming the worst day of the year into something new, something that honored the past while celebrating the present. The ceremony was small, held in Caleb's backyard with close family and friends bearing witness. Ellie was the flower girl, taking her job so seriously she walked slower than the bride. Nina was Rachel's maid of honor, standing tall and proud and only crying a little. Marie officiated, her voice steady as she spoke about love and loss and the courage it took to try again. When Caleb slipped the ring on Rachel's finger, he thought about the man he'd been 2 years ago, broken, hollow, convinced his chance at happiness had died with Sarah. That man wouldn't recognize him now, wouldn't believe that pain could transform into purpose, that endings could become beginnings, that showing up even when you were terrified could lead you home. "I love you," Caleb said, the words feeling both inadequate and perfect. "I love you too," Rachel replied. "Thank you for not giving up, for showing up, for choosing this even when it scared you." "Always," Caleb promised. "I will always show up for you." They kissed as husband and wife while their families cheered, while snow began to fall in light flakes that transformed the world into something magical. And standing there in the cold December evening, surrounded by the people they loved, Caleb Turner and Rachel Monroe proved that sometimes the best love stories start with disasters, that sometimes you have to walk through storms to find what you're looking for, that sometimes showing up, broken, terrified, convinced you're not ready, is the bravest thing you can do. Because life wasn't about perfect timing or flawless execution. It was about connection and courage and the willingness to try again even when you'd lost everything. It was about showing up, even when you were late, even when you were lost, even when you were sure you'd forgotten how to do this. You showed up anyway, and sometimes, if you were very lucky, you found someone who'd walk through their own storm to meet you. Someone who understood that love the second time around looked different, but could be just as beautiful. Someone who chose you, not despite your broken pieces, but because they had broken pieces too, and together you could build something whole. Caleb and Rachel had found that. Against all odds, despite every reason to give up, they'd found each other in a snowstorm and decided to weather every season together. And as they danced their first dance as husband and wife, surrounded by family and falling snow and the promise of all the years ahead, they knew with absolute certainty that they'd made the right choice. They'd chosen love. They'd chosen hope. They'd chosen to show up. And that was enough. That was everything.